before mine does.
Oh, it's saying we're live, Tina.
It's saying we're live?
Yeah, it's just saying
yet.
It starts at the Pacific Ocean, so it hits me first.
It hits you first.
My face is all weird. I have like I have a hat line.
Wait. You have a hat line? It's working for me now.
Do you see it? It's freaking, yeah, I don't like it. Anyway, we should do this show.
We should do the show. We have so much to talk about today. Hi, I'm Tina-Desiree Berg. I'm here with my co-host.
I'm your co-host too.
You're my co.
We all live in the same house.
We're on the same coast. Does that count? Lots to talk about today. Interesting things in the news cycle. I want to mention while people are filtering in.
Smash the like button.
Exactly. Smash the like
button. Welcome to Status Coup.
Break it.
Smash it. Don't harm your equipment.
No, don't do that. We want you to still be able to watch the show. But coming up at 5 o'clock, we have the Right Wing Insanity Report. This week on the show, I have a very interesting guest. People will want to tune in for this. I interviewed an ex-FBI agent that was undercover with right-wing extremists and neo-Nazi groups back in the 90s. And then he became an FBI whistleblower, and now he works at the Brennan Center of Justice, where he works on areas related to right-wing extremism and white supremacists and law enforcement and reform in that area. So he's a very interesting guy, very informative interview, lots to learn from him. And in fact, we have a clip, I think. Let's play the clip as a teaser. Right-wing extremism has sort of been ignored a long time by law enforcement. I think January 6th has changed quite a bit of that, but there was definitely a focus more on the left. I think of Timothy McVeigh when you talk about that, because he went down to Waco, Texas. He was also a prolific reader of the Turner Diaries, which is a white supremacy handbook. And obviously he was very much right-wing militia and anti-government, which is what motivated his bombing. But there was definitely a white supremacy hairline running through him.
Absolutely. And you know, again, and it was interesting as well, because it's not just law enforcement, it's also the media in many cases where, you know, there were enough ties to white supremacy and white supremacist groups in the Oklahoma City bombing, and yet the media characterized them as militia rather than white supremacists. And I see the same dynamic happening with the January 6th attack on the Capitol, where the Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers are both in the charging and in the media seen as the drivers there, but there were a whole lot of white supremacists there.
100%, yeah.
And, you know, I don't think they just happened to be in DC on that day, all at the same time in the same place.
Right.
And yet you don't see either the media or law enforcement really treating this as a white supremacist attack. Which is somewhat frustrating, because the Proud Boys, of course, many of the different chapters openly profess their white supremacy, and yet it's still thought that the group itself is not, when I don't think that's accurate.
So interesting guy. He talks a little bit about how a lot of these groups, Ron, are inseparable, right? So a lot of the right-wing militia are white supremacists by design and vice versa. Hence the, talk about Timothy McVeigh. He's known as a right-wing militia guy, but the Turner Diaries, this is the novel that brought us Day of the Rope, which is when they talk about putting everybody that is not Aryan onto a rope, literally. So it's a really hardcore neo-Nazi handbook, and he was handing those out down in Waco, Texas, before he did the bombing. So
I mean, I admittedly did not know that about Timothy McVeigh. I didn't know that about him. I knew he was like a right-wing guy, and but I didn't know he had direct white supremacy ties.
Yeah, so Mike sort of gets into that, and he's very refreshing and candid about his experiences. So everybody will want to stay tuned in after our live stream to hear what Mike has to say. All right, so off the top, Ron, what is going on with Twitter? What is going on with Elon Musk? So much to talk about here. I want to talk about his efforts to not understand brand safety, because I think that's part and parcel to the conversation. I want to talk about his efforts of free speech not actually being free, because he wants to prioritize some tweets over the others, and that's based on whether you're willing to pay amount of money. So that's really by design not democratic, not free speech.
There are so many layers to this. There are so many layers. And honestly, if we had to sum it up, and we're going to get into all this, we're going to unpack it, but this comes down to Elon Musk is the dog who caught the car. You know, this was his funny, like, oh, I'm going to buy it. Let this sink in. And it's like, well, it should sink in for you, Elon, because now you own this and you got to report to advertisers and to your fanboys. And you're not going to like this. You are not going to. I mean, the one thing I can guarantee, I don't know what this means for the future of Twitter. I have a feeling it's not going to be good. You know, and we'll get into all this. Like, we're going to unpack why. But I can think the one thing I can definitively say, he's going to have buyer's remorse if he doesn't already.
Oh, 100%. 44 billion is he overpaid. He overpaid for the platform. Which is why he's so desperate to come up with cash.
10. It's worth at most 10. And then even with his monthly thing, he's like, all right, well, let's get into it. Let's get into it.
I want to first put up
one topic at a time.
I want to first put up a tweet that he put up last night, which sort of encapsulates for me how he doesn't understand the advertising business model. Let's put that up, Colin. So basically, he put up a poll, and let's just say right off the bat that this is a false dichotomy. It's not one or the other, and it's not even related to what advertisers do, right? So the question is, advertisers should support freedom of speech or political correctness. They're not in the business of either of these things, all right? Freedom of speech is a pact between you and the government. An advertiser is basically looking for ways to sell a brand, right? To advertise to the general public and increase sales and marketing. It has nothing to do with free speech or political correctness. But why can't Elon Musk not understand a brand like any brand, really, including his own Tesla, wouldn't want to be having their ads placed next to Hitler Lover 1488? How was this a difficult concept?
Well, when did he do this poll, by the way? I didn't notice the date.
Yesterday.
Oh, okay. Because, well, here's the thing. Here's why he did that poll. He did that poll because advertisers are bailing. Right. And why are advertisers bailing? Because guess what advertisers want to see? Users. And right now, he's driving people away from Twitter. And there's like, we're going to discuss like what's going on. But it's like, if people are leaving the platform, advertisers are just going to say, hey, man, we're done with you. I mean, keep in mind, and this is just like something we all need to keep in mind as we go through this. Twitter is already, compared to Instagram and Facebook, the smallest. Like, Twitter is a little more niche. It is more focused on news and politics. So for people who talk about this stuff, like shows around this stuff, are journalists, comedians, etc., we like Twitter. But a lot of other people that they don't really go on Twitter already. So if Twitter is going to become, you know, just this sort of a bunch of like Elon Musk edgelord sycophants, and that's going to like dominate the platform, and then there's going to be like a paid scale as to whether or not your replies get shown and stuff like that, and the algorithm's going to favor people who give $8 a month. That's just going to further and further make it more and more of a niche thing, and people are just going to bail, or they're not going to use it near as much.
I agree.
And so, and that's already happening. It might not be a permanent thing, but this could very well be like Twitter's MySpace descent. I mean, if for those of us who remember MySpace.
Wait, Ron, who remembers Friendster?
I never used it, but I do remember it. Were you on it?
Yes, of course.
No, I never used it.
Friendster.
But it's like MySpace was. I actually thought MySpace was the best. I feel like we didn't know what we had, you know?
Yeah.
Like, MySpace I thought was the coolest, but then Tom sold it, and it just became a spam center. Like you were just spam nonstop, and it's because it became less cool, so people started bailing. So
yeah,
Rupert
they started
Murdoch,
going to Facebook. Yeah.
Yeah. So like Rupert Murdoch or whoever else had it. I know it switched hands, but I know Rupert had it at one point. You know, I say it like we're like on first date basis. Oh, Rupee. Big Roop Town, he had it. But like Rupert Murdoch had it at one point, and they just made it a big spam farm. So people didn't like being spam caught. So more people left it, and now it is what it is now. I don't know if it's even a thing. But so this could be the beginning of that for Twitter. I can't say definitively. I don't think any of us can.
Well, I think we can look at advertising as really important for him to recoup his investment, right? So we know that at base. We also know that when you have a 500% increase of the N-word on your site, when you have neo-Nazis rejoining to test the waters and talking about it in their Telegram rooms and posting blatantly anti-Semitic memes and not getting shut down for it, this is a bad soup, right? Advertisers don't want it. It's called brand safety. I want to put up this article from Futurism, because several of the largest ad agencies have now put out recommendations to their clients to pull their advertising from Twitter, at least in the short term, until they can see what's going to happen. Part of what brought this to fruition is Elon Musk laid off a big chunk of the content moderators. And so they're now working with a very small skeleton crew. They're not able to keep up with the influx, obviously, of hate speech. So it's a disaster for brands. All right, so advertisers,
they don't realize that like some people just don't want to be around this stuff. You know,
most people don't.
Most people, right? Most people don't. So it's like you're just going to have, and that's why Elon Musk. I mean, look, he has that portion of his fan base that are incels and white supremacists, and they feel empowered right now because their king has Twitter. You know, and he's going to be their warrior or whatever. But now Elon has to answer to the advertisers who are like, hey, we don't want to be on this. We're not getting any value out of this. Sorry.
And we're gonna talk about the content side of that in a second too, because they are also saying, now this isn't going to work for us.
So it will be, I mean, it will be kind of humorous when a lot of his sycophants start turning on him, which will happen.
Which will happen, I agree. All right, advertisers are fleeing Twitter in droves now that Tesla and SpaceX CEO Elon Musk has taken over control. Ever since officially closing the $44 billion deal, Musk has been gutting the company's executive suite and dissolving its board. Senior executives, as well as Twitter's advertising chief, Sarah Personette, have departed as well. After all, Musk has been very clear about his disdain for advertising for years now. The resulting uncertainty has advertisers spooked. Major advertising holding company IPG has already advised clients to pull out temporarily, and the billionaire CEO is in serious damage mode. Now Reuters reports Musk is spending most of this week meeting with advertisers in New York, trying to reassure them that Twitter won't turn into a free-for-all hellscape. But that's already happened. I mean, come on. When you have a 400% increase in the N-word on your platform within 12 hours, there's a problem. Advertisers are reportedly grilling Musk over his plans to address the rampant misinformation being spread on the platform, a trend that Musk himself has been actively contributing to since the acquisition. So here's the thing. That's the other part we haven't even mentioned yet, is the disinformation. You know, brands don't want to be associated with that as well. And Musk was tweeting out misinformation, and then he deleted the tweets, but still it's out there.
Dog caught the car.
The dog
caught the car. And, you know, it really sucks too. I mean, you know, it's kind of, I mean, it is kind of hubris from the perspective of him. I mean, he's totally flailing right now, but it does suck because Twitter, you know, and I have my complaints about Twitter. It's not like I was totally fine with the way it was being run in the first place, but Twitter, even despite its flaws, was still a valuable tool. Like it was a valuable tool is finding, you know, in finding like what is going on, what is trending, what are accounts I'm following, talking about and stuff like that. And I hope that doesn't completely go away, or it at least goes somewhere else, because like there is that part of it. And part of it is, you know, and we're going to get into this as far as the content goes, you know, the blue check thing, well, it is very frustrating and annoying.
I think it's worse than that. It's rigging the system. So free speech is now for sale on the platform. Let's bring up that tweet, Colin, if you have a second. So part of his second plan is he's going to start charging for verification. Let me say right off the top about this. Are you kidding me? Verification was never supposed to be a status symbol. It wasn't. That's not what it's about. Verification was supposed to be a badge for users to be able to trust that the person they were speaking to was the real person and not a fake account. That's all it was. So if you really want to democratize having blue checks, open that up to anybody that wants to be verified. If they're willing to like prove to Twitter that they are who they say they are, they shouldn't have to be famous or influential to have that. If you
I agree.
If you want to democratize the system, do it this way. Don't do what he's doing. He's basically saying, if you can afford it, if you're willing to pay me, I will give you a verification badge. So most people that are now verified are going to be like, F off. I don't want it. I'm speaking for myself here. You can take my blue badge. I don't care. Take it. I'm not paying you for it. But also beyond that, it's what's attached to that is more disturbing. This is now rigging the algorithm to somebody that's willing to pay to do that, right? So if you have a verified account, you're going to be showing higher priority in replies, higher priority in tweets on trending hashtags, and everything that goes with that. And his tweet, let's put up the tweet. He actually tells you straight out that that's what he's planning on doing, even more so once he's put this in place. So it's already happening now. We know this, right? So he's saying right here, I'm going to rig the system. You will also get priority in replies, mentions, and search, which is essential to defeat spam scam. No, it's not. Let's stop there. It's not. Because if you have a spam count that's willing to pay you $8 a month, how does that defeat it, Elon? You can't have it both ways. Ability to post long video and audio and half as many ads. Not no ads, half as many ads. So this is just a bizarre... So, and now the way he's also framing this too, Ron, he's saying that he's defeating this idea that it's current lords and peasants versus everybody else. Really? Because there are plenty of verified accounts that aren't wealthy, aren't elitist at all. They're, poverty-stricken journalists that care about doing a public service, for example. So this idea that that's true is just ridiculous.
Well, the whole thing's ridiculous. I mean, look, and by the way, like when I said like the verification model currently has its frustrations, it's because it's not all that democratic, like, I mean, I personally have tried multiple times, even though I've been impersonated before, even though I've been threatened before and was able to show all those screenshots, they still have not verified me. So the current system does have its flaws, but it is, like you said, for verification's sake. And that's why, again, this kind of gets back to just the platform itself and people using it. Like news articles, blog posts, news, online news articles, whatever, almost all of them will consistently quote somebody based on Twitter. And that's what draws users to it. That this person is tweeting X and this is a quote from them. Right. And more users go on the platform because they're like, well, I want to be hip to this. I want to be abreast of this. I want to follow this personality I like or whatever. So if verification is just up for sale,
it's bad.
That's going to completely gut all of it. And you're also going to have these big names that, or just names that are popular that people follow for whatever, that are going to be like, screw you. I'm not doing that. I can get
that's the majority of them. I don't. Yeah, I think the vast majority of people that are current verified are not going to pay for it. I won't pay for it.
And I don't think anyone should, because then that's really making it clear to this guy, because Elon Musk doesn't realize, the celebrities and stuff like that, they don't need Twitter. Twitter needs them.
Right.
So they can, and I'm not saying like that's the way it should be or not. I'm just saying that's the way it is.
No, it is the way it is.
Screw you. Like, we don't need your little blue badge. We can still get quoted in news articles. They'll just do it the old fashioned way. They'll frickin' email us and we'll respond, Right. So again, he is just completely, I mean,
it just doesn't make sense. Nobody is going to pay Elon Musk to post more content. Content creation is what makes that platform. It's what makes any platform. Without the content, you don't have anything. You have no reason for an audience to show up and use your platform. So it's absolutely backwards to not understand that, especially when there are competing platforms, i.e. TikTok, Instagram, whoever else, that are willing to partner with content creators and get them paid versus asking them for money. It's ridiculous. So this sort of also goes against what the platform was headed in the direction they were. So, currently they launched the beta version of the super follows feature, 6 or 7 months ago. And that was an effort to allow people to subscribe directly to your favorite content creator for a small fee, $2.99 a month. And, Twitter is giving you the majority of that. They're taking only part of it for being the platform. But that makes more sense to me, right? So if you want to subscribe to some journalists, premium clips or something. So maybe they post a shorter clip and then they take the longer interview and they put it behind the paywall, sort of a thing. So that makes sense to me, right? You're not taking advantage of your content creators or asking them to pay to maybe have, like, because now he's saying, well, eventually I'm going to share the wealth with the content creators. I'm like, yeah, no, you've dug yourself into a $44 billion hole without understanding exactly what you were getting into. I think a lot of it was based on a narcissistic argument that you had on Twitter with others. Like, you got caught up in that. And here we are. I mean, it's just craziness.
It's just an ego thing. I mean, it really is. I mean, there's a very like Trumpian way in which he's going about everything, just firing a bunch of people and appointing yourself chief, but having no idea what you're doing. I mean, you know, all these things that he's saying. I mean, he's just like, well, I'm going to follow. There's going to be an advisory board, and I'm going to follow the free speech laws. Okay, well, who is this board? What are their qualifications? You know, like, I like the idea of platforms following the free speech laws of the United States, but what gives Elon Musk that qualification? And how is he going to do such a thing?
It doesn't.
Like, it doesn't. So
he's not interested in free speech, Ron. He's interested in controlling speech. And there's a big difference, which is the case with every billionaire out there, period. Like, I haven't yet seen one yet that is not interested in that. That's
you haven't seen one? You haven't seen one billionaire that's not really into power yet? You haven't seen that? I'm sure they're out there. I mean, I haven't seen it either, but there's got to be one of them, right?
No, man, this is why they buy media companies, and social media is the next, tier of that. That's,
it's almost like you wouldn't be a billionaire if you weren't a sociopath. I mean, it's almost like that. I mean, I don't know. Maybe that's true.
No, I agree. It's sort of kind of goes hand in hand with it. What else do you have to say on that? If not, I'm going to switch over to.
Well, I do want to say a couple things as far as I think we covered it as far as like what's going on with the platform, but here is one interesting little one component that I do think is a little bit of a silver lining if we can actually hold him to his bluff here. Colin, can you bring up that Fight for the Future tweet? So this is something that before Elon Musk had Twitter, he tweeted this out. I agree with it. So Elon Musk tweeted, Twitter DM should have end-to-end encryption like Signal, so no one can spy on or hack your messages. I agree with that sentiment.
I agree with that. I agree with that. Yeah.
So Fight for the Future, which full disclaimer is an organization I collaborate with, but they said, hey, Elon Musk, you going to reaffirm this? Right. You can do something about it now. I wonder if Elon still feels strongly about this now that he is the person who can spy on and hack your DMs. Now that he's the guy. But it just so happens there's a website where we have a call to action for this. It's makedmsafe.com, makedmssafe.com. You can go sign the petition that demands encryption protection on all messages on social media. So go ahead and sign that, because guess what? Now Elon Musk has access to your messages. And before we get off this topic, I just want to speak from like a thematic standpoint here. It should bother you, regardless of all the things that Elon Musk is displaying he doesn't care about or understand. It should bother every single person on this planet that a billionaire, no matter who they are, a random billionaire can just buy a platform that is used by millions of people and then can just do whatever the hell they want with it. That's disturbing. Something like that should not be allowed to happen. That completely goes against the public good in every way, shape, and form, and it's quite frankly frightening. In the digital village, Elon Musk is the lord. We are the frickin' peasants. And there's several other lords. There's Lord Zuckerberg. There's Lord Murdoch. And it's not good. How do we start fighting this? Well, it's going to be a long road, folks, but some antitrust is the way.
I was just going to say that. Antitrust is the way to go.
There's a reason we talk about this stuff. There's a reason we talk about this stuff. So please, everybody, if you haven't yet, sign the petition, BidenPromise.us. Colin, if you can pull that website up real quick, BidenPromise.us. There are antitrust bills floating around Congress now. We've been talking about it. We've been promised a vote since June. This petition demands action during the lame duck session. Tell President Biden, don't cave to big tech. BidenPromise.us. Because this is why these issues are important. This is why we spend time on this digital rights beats. Because when some lunatic billionaire buys a frickin' platform, there's a lot of cyclical effects that go along with that, and they're not good. So, we got to fight back.
Yeah, I agree. No, I agree with you. The Department of Justice should absolutely start enforcing antitrust laws again. They haven't done that for decades, and it's definitely part and parcel of the problem.
Well, and they don't. Not only do they not really enforce what's on the books, but they don't have current things on the books. I mean, the last time we had significant antitrust was the 80s, and they never think about it when all these mergers are going on. They're like, oh, we're gonna merge all the grocery stores. I see no problem. Time Warner, CNN, you guys, I don't see how. Comcast, MSNBC, I don't see a problem there either. It's just like, none of these are red flags to you. What is the point of what you do? Enforcing antitrust in the U.S. must be the easiest job in the world. You just occasionally wake up from a nap and go, I see no problems here, and then go back to sleep. What a gig.
Oh, yeah, no, it's bad. Part of regulatory capture. So I also wanted to mention today that the beginning of the trial against the Trump Organization criminal tax fraud started today. I wanted to pull up some news on that.
Speaking of sociopaths.
Yeah. Now, mind you, they're not going after Trump personally here. They're going after Trump Organization. But today, if we pull that, it's the NBC News article, Colin.
Smash that like button, folks, and leave a super chat. We get to those at the end.
Yes, 100%. So the Trump Organization stands trial this week in what prosecutors allege was a 15-year scheme to compensate top executives of former President Donald Trump's company off the books to help them avoid paying taxes, with the company's former chief financial officer appearing as the prosecution's star witness. Jury selection began Monday, with potential panelists likely to be questioned intensely about whether they can be impartial in a case that involves the former president and his company. An initial group of 132 potential jurors entered the courtroom to begin the screening process at about 11 a.m. Eastern. State Judge Juan Merchan told them the defendants are accused of a series of crimes, including tax fraud, and are alleged to have devised and operated a large-term scheme to fail to report income tax on tax forms. Merchant also said potential witnesses could include Trump, his son Donald Trump Jr. and Eric Trump, and his daughter Ivanka Trump. The initial number of potential jurors was whittled down by more than half after several hours of questioning in certain cases over associations with the Trump Organization, or the prosecutor, an attorney for the defense said. There were also a lot of bias concerning the Trump Organization. Yeah, I would imagine that would be the case in both directions. The Trump Organization and Alan Weisselberg, his former longtime chief financial officer, were indicted last year after a year-long investigation into the company's financial practices by the Manhattan District Attorney's Office. Weisselberg, 75, pleaded guilty to 15 felony charges in August. As part of his plea agreement, the loyal Trump confidant agreed to pay nearly $2 million in taxes, interest, and penalties, and serve 5 months in jail, followed by 5 years of probation. He also agreed to testify truthfully at the upcoming trial of the Trump Organization or face a sentence of up to 5 to 15 years in prison, prosecutors said. Manhattan,
how powerful people are treated. You have to tell the truth or something might happen to you. Like regular people, it's just assume in the courtroom you're going to have to tell the frickin' truth. But they're just like, okay, I know you probably lie every day and every hour, but you have to tell the truth here. Or there might be a fine. You're not going to like it.
Not going to like it. Anyway, we'll have to, that's pretty just wanted to bring this up to everybody's attention. We don't have to go deep on this because we don't have details of the trial yet. But I mean, this is a massive tax scheme fraud that affects several oligarchs. So we'll see what happens this week when that.
Oh man, oligarchs are cheating the system. I can't believe it.
I know, shocking.
Who saw this coming? Yeah, I mean,
literally everyone. Well, no, hang on. We all knew it was happening, but actual prosecution, that's a whole nother thing, right?
Yeah, you don't see that all the time. I mean, look, Trump was an oligarch before he was president. He was an oligarch while he was president. He's an oligarch now. I have a feeling, I mean, this seems like pretty on the nose, like they were for sure doing this. So I have a feeling there'll just be some sediment. They'll have to pay a fee. Right.
Probably. All right. In other news relating back to corporate greed, rising Fed rates and how this is squeezing the lower middle classes, I wanted to talk about yesterday. So we had a 75%, 0.75 point basis rate increase from the Fed. This is the fourth rate increase in a row at their meetings. It's the largest series I think we've ever had historically. Why does this matter? Well, they're saying they're trying to fight inflation, right? That's what the Fed says they do. They say they want to keep that at a targeted 2%. Now, if you follow traditional economics, the reason for inflation is generally tied to an increase in wages and nothing more, but that's actually not what's happening. Most of the increase in inflation is just absolute corporate greed and profiteering. They're taking a higher margin, profit margin, and wages are still suppressed because they haven't even kept up with the pace of inflation.
Well, and I just want to add, though, that type of economics, which is the general economics that, you know, you're taught in school, it follows a neoliberal playbook that has been debunked time and time again because it is absolute bullshit that has been failing this world for 40 years plus. And it leaves out so many freaking factors. Like it operates under this model that we're all just a bunch of widgets. And it's like, well, there's too many dollars now because the widgets have too much of it. That's not how the freaking world works. That's just not how the world works. And time again, that's been proven. And there's all kinds of like MMT and other economic schools of thought that debunk all of this because they actually do the work at diving a little bit deeper and incorporating humanity into it.
Right. Part of it too, Ron, I think the biggest issue is that they look at the employment rate as their only gauge, right? They don't look at underemployment, right? So if their end goal is to have low unemployment and they get it to a certain level, they think it's fine if people can't make enough money apparently to pay for their bills. Yeah. Obviously, this isn't a correct gauge because at some point it's a disaster to have 50% of your population working in jobs that don't allow them to pay rent, buy food, and have a little bit of extra money left over for consumer spending because, again, our entire system is driven by consumption, right? So they need people to spend money in order for the economy to grow. So it's really a false idea to just look at employment in and of itself and not understand that a big chunk of that is just underemployment and people can't pay their bills.
Well, yeah, the way we measure employment is bullshit on its own. Like looking at just that is a bullshit thing to do.
Well, if you follow
the way we even measure that.
Yeah, it's not accurate.
If you follow the rules, if you're discouraged and not looking, if you're underemployed, none of those are counted. And even what we just qualify as living, a lot of times, especially in the good old contemporary USA, it's not living, it's surviving and barely surviving. So it's a bullshit metric 6 ways to Sunday. And but let's see what they're saying.
Let's see what they're saying. I do have a clip of a video from Powell that Colin, if you can pull that up and play that.
We are taking forceful and rapid steps to moderate demand so that it comes into better alignment with supply. Our overarching focus is using our tools to bring inflation back down to our 2% goal and to keep longer-term inflation expectations well anchored. Reducing inflation is likely to require a sustained period of below-trend growth, and there will very likely be some softening of labor market conditions. Restoring price stability is essential to set the stage for achieving maximum employment and stable prices over the longer run. We will keep at it until we're confident the job is done.
Now, mind you, I want to read it again. Nothing he says addresses the fact that a lot of these jobs don't pay enough, that the inflation is not being caused by wages. Wages are still suppressed because they haven't kept pace with inflation. So, which makes these two things a disaster. Now, adding to this, Ron, my bigger concern is the fact that credit card rates, especially if you have a variable credit card rate, those rates are tied to the Fed funds rate. So that means we're going to see another substantial increase probably in credit card interest rates, which means those that have been using those credit cards the last few years just to survive, just to get by, are now looking at a higher burden just by what the Fed did yesterday. So this could hit those that need the most help the hardest. So on that note, I wanted to bring up two competing articles. The first one is a CNN business article, and then I'm going to turn to an article from Robert Reich, who is the only one that seems to understand this relationship. So the CNN article, if you can pull that up, Colin. Yeah, there we go. So this one's addressing the relationship to credit cards. They do touch on some of the concerns that I have, so I give them credit for that. All right. So as prices continue to rise, Americans are becoming increasingly reliant on credit cards to make purchases. And now with the Federal Reserve's latest 0.75 percentage point hike, many of them will be paying more for the debt that they've been accumulating. Interest rates on nearly all credit cards and home equity lines of credit will increase after this latest rate hike, and borrowers with variable interest rates will notice the difference quickly, said Tad Rossman, senior industry analyst at Bankrate. It's pretty much right away within a statement cycle or two. Okay, this is the frightful part. At a little over 18%, the average APR new credit cards is within a percentage point of its all-time high of 19%, set in July of 1991, according to Rossman. The effect on existing credit card borrowers is probably actually worse, he said, because of the rate hikes the Fed has undertaken already this year. Chances are your credit card is already 2.25 percentage points higher than it was in March. That's right. We've had 4 consecutive rate hikes. So they're mounting. Despite the climbing rates, credit card debt is rapidly approaching the all-time record set in the fourth quarter of 2019, Rossman said. So this should also be a massive concern to these folks. The fact that the credit card debt overall has increased for the obvious reasons, and it's not just COVID. COVID's definitely part of it, right? People didn't have jobs. They were using their credit cards to get by to survive. But part of it is also the fact that we've had increases not only in consumer goods, food, but also rent. Rents are at an all-time high. And just things that you need to get by, gas, things of this nature. So when you can't make ends meet and you're living paycheck to paycheck, what do? You turn to your credit card and you use that. Well, if you're now seeing, credit card rates, the average is 19%. I've seen some as high as 27%, Ron, 27%. This is untenable. So if you've amassed debt over the last 3 or 4 years at a lower rate, thinking like, okay, I'll be able to make this payment, now all of a sudden you can't make the payment.
This is all a gross self-inflicted wound by society. This is all, I mean, you are taught like, oh, well, we can't pump money into the economy. We can't give higher wages because it'll cause inflation because people will have more money. That's not how it frickin' works. That's not how it works. That operates under this idea that we're all just brain dead widgets standing around. And when more money enters a society, which by the way is just created, that nothing happens. Nobody pays a bill. Nobody goes out and buys something. Nobody has an exchange of goods and services or an exchange of labor. That is exactly what happens. And there is no reason why anybody should be underemployed in this society. There is no reason why anybody should not be able to find a job if they want one and are able to do one. We have crumbling infrastructure. We have a collapsing climate. There is so much to be done, and we have the ability to do all of it. We have the ability to do all of it because the currency can just be created, and then we can use the resources to do what we need. There's no reason for it other than corporate greed, because they have to use this farce of scarcity so that
it's a false scarcity. Yeah,
so that people will just be obedient. They want it this way. It's benefiting a small handful of people. And it's all based on neoliberal economic bullshit. Read Stephanie Kelton, read Debt by David Graeber, that puts all this stuff to rest once and for all. There's no reason why we can't have an efficient federal jobs program. There's no reason why we can't have strong infrastructure. There's no reason why we can't start completely getting off fossil fuels. There's no reason why anybody who is able to work shouldn't be able to. And there's also no reason why anybody should go hungry in a country with the amount of wealth that this country has. There's no freaking reason for it. California was just declared the 4th largest GDP in the world. And they were celebrating this. Gavin Newsom was wetting himself. We're the 4th largest GDP in the world. And we still don't have an efficient train that goes from San Francisco to Los Angeles. We can't pull that off. 4th largest GDP in the world. And it also costs an arm and a leg and 2 legs to freaking live here. So, man, what a bargain. What a freaking bargain. We're the 4th largest GDP in the world. Who helps make that GDP possible? The people who freaking live here
and
they have to pay out the ass to exist here. Yeah. What a freaking scam. And then you have people on the corporate media, these financial analysts, whatever they are, and they just peddle this absolute bullshit that nobody should take remotely serious because it's all just a bunch of fluff that can be pushed over like a feather. There's no reason for any of this. The whole idea of like the way we measure credit and stuff, that can just be traced back to what, like 1987? That's another load of bullshit that was just used to basically discriminate against people buying houses, usually black and brown people. So it's just a freaking scam. You are living. The United States is like if a parking ticket was a country. It's just a scam.
So, and of course the financial powers that be, the talking heads that work in business news, go on to say basically, well, now's the time to pay off your credit card debt, as if that's a possibility. For most people in this position, that's not possible. That's why they're in this position to begin with. So to just flippantly say, pay off the debt before it increases is kind of an ignorant stance.
It's always the regular person's fault somehow. Do you ever notice that? Do you ever notice in all these like little things? It's always our fault. It's always your fault. It's always my fault. It's always the person trying to go to college. It's their fault. It's never the fault of the powers that be. That either are this clueless or it's by design.
It's by design, Ron, because we were not always this way. We have been stepping in this direction for several decades. It was not always this way, right? There was a time when you could afford to go to college because the college system was still funded by, at least the public system was still funded by taxpayer dollars. There was a time where you made a decent wage relative to what rents cost. There was a time when we had more affordable housing and rent control laws. Like all of these things were given away, and you're correct, neoliberal pushes towards privatization. Arguments taken up by both sides of the aisle that the free market is the moral arbiter when that's simply not the case. I would also add one more thing to this. Part and parcel to this, to bring it up again, is the antitrust. The fact that the Department of Justice stopped enforcing antitrust laws have also led us in this direction, because there are fewer companies out there, right, offering more services in a competitive way. There's now a handful, and no matter what industry you're looking at, that control the resources, and that's never good for consumers. And it allows them to engage in the profiteering that we're seeing right now. It allows them to expand their profit margins, to take more in profit, and then to turn around and just have the Fed say, well, it's because everybody's getting a job, so we have to do something about increases in wages, when those increases just don't exist. It's a provable fact that this is profiteering. So on that note, I want to pull up a article from Robert Reich that was in The Guardian. He's going to give us I think, the more lucid argument as to what's happening here. So basically, he's saying corporations are using rising costs as an excuse to increase their prices even higher, resulting in record profits. We need limited price controls to break this cycle. So on Wednesday, policymakers at the Federal Reserve, America's central bank, continued their battle against inflation with a third straight supersized interest rate increase. And they warned that they're not done. They'll continue raising borrowing costs until inflation is tamed. They assume that the underlying economic problem is a tight labor market causing wages to rise and prices to rise in response. And they believe interest rate increases are necessary to slow this wage price inflation. This is dead wrong. Wage increases have not even kept up with inflation. Most workers' paychecks are shrinking in terms of real purchasing power. Rather than causing inflation, wages are actually reducing inflationary pressures. The underlying economic problem is profit price inflation. It's caused by corporations raising their prices above their increasing costs. Corporations corporations have the power to raise prices without losing customers because they face so little competition. Since the 1980s, 2/3 of all American industries have become more concentrated. Why are grocery prices through the roof? Because just 4 companies control 85% of meat and poultry processing.
And that's about to get worse, by the way.
Exactly. Just one corporation sets the price for most of the nation's seed corn, and 2 giant firms dominate consumer staples. Again, this is relating back to the antitrust laws, right? All are raising prices and increasing profits because they can. That's it. That's the reason right there, folks. It's because they can. It's completely disconnected from what Powell was saying in that video, is my point.
No, and this is definitely going in the better direction. I still think there's a lot more factors than just that. But I think like he's going in the right direction, that, it's just corporate greed. They're raising the prices because they can. And also, I think there's another component going on here. Look, people at Starbucks, they're striking. They're trying to form unions. People at Amazon, they're working on forming unions. They're striking. We're going to talk about a story coming up here in California that might be the biggest strike in 2022. That's coming up here in a minute or two. So The powers that be don't like that. So they're like, oh, that's why prices are so high. It's because people are striking. They're trying to sell you that bullshit.
It's
bullshit.
It's just that. Don't buy it. Don't buy it.
Just look at their profit margins. They're making record profits. The oil companies are making record profits right now. What they do is they take disasters in society or war or whatever it is, and they use it to justify jacking up their prices to screw over everybody. And like even that article points out, they don't have any competition, so they're doing just fine. So then their profit margins are through the roof, and they try to sell the idea to you that the reason for the high prices are because of workers. It's a lie.
It's a lie. And I think
it's always been a lie. It's always been a scam. And it's just coming to a head.
More pronounced.
That's what's happening.
It's definitely more pronounced now. Ron, I would also say that the other great disconnect that we're seeing increase is that the stock market is a good gauge for the broader economy, and it's simply not the case.
The stock market
used to be more connected to the economy than it is now. We could always make the argument that there's, they're two different.
Back when regular people had a fighting chance at participating a little bit. Yeah. I mean, if you want to go back.
But now it's so completely broken that I would say that stock market is just a gauge for rich people's feelings and nothing more. I don't think it points to anything about the broader economy at this point.
Absolutely. Nothing at all. I mean, and yeah, there was a point where we had a real middle class. So the stock market, there were just basically more people participating. Right. I mean, for the most part, our stock market has always been, there's been a lot of bullshit, like always. But it used to at least be something more people had the opportunity to participate in. Then when the middle class was eliminated, I mean, it's not shrinking, folks. It's gone, okay? There is the rich and the working poor. That's all we got. So, now that that's gone, it's a complete useless barometer. It has nothing to do with the economy as a whole. It is literally, rich people's feelings is the right way.
How I look at it.
All it does.
So on that note, I want to turn to breaking news in workers' rights area. The UC is going on strike. They have now authorized a strike. So this is breaking news. We don't know what's going to happen yet. They've just authorized the strike. Some numbers for you. 98% voted yes to strike. 98% of the union membership did. That's 36,558 votes that were cast over 10 campuses.
Now, what's going through the head of that 2%?
Yeah.
That's all. I mean, are they kind of the people that are representing the industry interests? Who are those 2%?
I don't know.
Or is it like I'm 2 weeks away from retirement. I don't want to deal with this shit. All right. I don't know. I'm sorry.
But none of these folks are away from retirement. So the group that's going on strike, these are student workers. I want to talk about why this is unique for a second. So this is a group that includes teachers, assistants, postdoc workers, those that do research, those that grade papers, things of this nature. Why does this matter? An important part of the conversation that is probably getting lost in the conversation already is that a lot of these folks actually bring in money to the UC system through grants, right? So they get a research grant. That is money that goes into the UC system. So I believe the number is $8 billion a year these folks are generating and bringing money into the UC system. So not only are these folks responsible for doing the research that's bringing in grant money, they're not being paid fairly. Right. So there's very legitimate reasons for these UC workers to go on or to call for an authorization to strike. So we don't know if they've got till November 14th to make that decision. Thus far, the UC has not come back with a good contract for them or even seem to be in the ballpark of having a good contract. They're not listening at all. What they're asking for, help with childcare, which makes sense. They're asking for transit passes, right, to get to work and back and forth every day, and for compensation to at least try to keep up with the cost of living. So for folks that think that these guys are paid a lot of money, they're not. Post-grad doc work is very low paying. A lot of them make maybe $2,500 a month, and I'm not exaggerating. I know this because I have friends that do this for a living. And these are very well-educated folks that could probably leave academic research and make a decent living somewhere else. So there's that thrown into the loop. So what are your thoughts on this, Ron?
Yeah, I mean, so first of all, one thing I think we should add, this has the chance at being the largest strike numerically so far in 2022. I mean, this is breaking. It's still unfolding. We don't know how things are going to land here, but this could be the biggest strike of the year, which is, I mean, that's significant. at my alma mater, Indiana University, there was a big grad student strike. And, I had mixed feelings about, well, I mean, I supported the strike, but as an alumni, part of me was really proud of my university leading the charge. But then part of me was really sad that, the university let it get to this point where they had to do that. You know what I mean? But I was, a big supporter. And, so they basically said, I mean, to put this in reference for people, and these are some postdocs and I believe, but there's some grad students involved too in this strike, right? The California
100%. So, yeah, postdocs are, so they're still, 100%.
Yeah. So what some people don't realize, if you haven't been through that, now both Tina and I we're recovering former academics, but
so wait, full disclosure, I went to a UC school too, so full disclosure.
Right. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So, but for people who might not have done that racket or whatever, when you are a grad student or whatever, you are typically what you get is you get a job. Basically, it's in a teaching assistantship, research, whatever it is, and as part of your compensation, you get tuition remission, which is a good thing, obviously. And then you get a living stipend.
Now,
it's not supposed to be quite a full salary, because part of your compensation is you're getting a free education. I understand that part of it, but it's supposed to be enough to live and live comfortably. It's not supposed to be a starvation, like a starvation wage. And it's gotten to the point where in many cases,
it is
less than the minimum wage.
Right.
And it shouldn't be that way. I get it. It's not going to be as high as what the head of the department makes. Okay,
but they're not even asking that, Ron. So
I know, no. That's what I'm saying. They're not getting paid a living wage at all.
They're not.
And here's the thing: the department relies on their labor. You are part of the department. It's not like you're just doing an internship or something. You are they rely on you. You teach the intro courses. When I was a freshman, all of my teachers were freaking graduate students.
Yep.
You grade papers. You assist in the classroom. You assist with research. There's publications that might not happen if not for you. You do office hours. You have a job. The department relies on the labor provided by graduate students. So yes, they should make a living wage. They should be able to live fairly.
So part of it
and
too
that's all they're asking for. And they should have health benefits.
Well, they do, I believe, through the university.
They were in the IU thing. They were underinsured, but yeah, I mean, it's
okay. Fair. I would say also part of it is that a lot of these folks are paid for part-time work, even though they work far more hours than what they're paid for. And I think the bigger issue here is this. It's something that we need to look at because all of these issues are sort of connected, right? So UC funding in particular has seen a sharp decline over the last 30 years. There was a time when the UC system was publicly funded 100% by taxpayer dollars. Each time they chisel away at that budget, it gets less and less. We see two things happen. Tuition increases, obviously, on the back end, and wages get suppressed at the university. So right now we're at a perfect storm, I believe, of both of those things. UC funding has been fluctuating between 8% and 11%. They might as well be a private university at this point. You cannot function with the state giving you 8% to 11%. You just can't. So I think part and parcel to the solution here is for the state to refinance the system. Part of why that doesn't happen is this. We have, two types of spending, right? Mandatory and discretionary. So the mandatory spending, you can't touch it. This is money that's been earmarked by either propositions that we've passed in the state, or it's been earmarked by the legislative body, or it needs to be earmarked because it needs to be. So that number has increased over time, right? The mandatory spending has become a much bigger column than the discretionary. The UC budget remains on the discretionary side of the California state budget. So whenever the full budget can't be balanced, guess what gets cut?
Mm-hmm.
The UC and Cal State system. So we have been in a declining spiral of this happening now for, I'd say, 20 years.
Yeah, and it's not exclusive to California. I mean, it's
not. It's not. It's happening everywhere with every public university system.
The frightening thing, actually, if we want to give people a point of reference, California is among the better out of all the states in the union.
Yeah.
I mean, California, and this bleeds into, adjunct teachers who have to work. They have a full-time teaching schedule. They still need to work.
They are very vastly underpaid as well. That's correct.
You can tell so much. I mean, you can tell a lot about a country by just the way it values labor in general, but you can really tell a lot by the way it values education. And we don't care at all. It is criminal the way we treat teachers from preschool through college. I mean, it is absolutely criminal. There's no other way to describe it. I mean, most people who are, I can speak from personal experience. Almost everybody I know who is an educator, they want to get out of it. And it has nothing to do with the students. It has nothing to do with the work. That's actually the part they enjoy. But our system, that is the opposite of what an educational system should be, is just destroying it for them. It's killing it for them. Some of the most brilliant people I know are just being like, yeah, I just want to get out of this field entirely and just go into industry. And it's so freaking sad. And it is robbing generations of young people of brilliant minds as educators. And it is just such, I mean, something has got to give here. I mean, this is, by the way, this is what capitalism does every single time it's tried. It's what it has always done. It's what it will always do. It always does this. It does not work. It does not work. It is no way to have a society. Never has been. Never will be. And you know, we're just in a late stage. We're just in a late stage. But the late stage always happens.
I don't know how you unring this bell, right?
You get a band-aid and then you get back to the late stage. And it takes about 40 years. Long enough for people to forget. But that's what happens every single frickin' time. And I mean, you know, we've had discussions about this, like from a theme standpoint, like education and stuff like that in general. I think it's going to get to the point you're going to just see a mass exodus. You're going to see people that, if they're able, they're just going to go abroad because, I mean,
yes. Well, keep in mind that
it's cheaper. It's cheaper.
Wait, no, it's free. You can get.
Well, no, but I mean, but if you're coming from the United States, you have travel costs and housing costs.
Right.
It's still cheaper.
Oh, it's way cheaper
because of the tuition. You know, tuition is either free or very, very affordable. It's like a couple $100 a semester or something.
Right.
So even factoring in the plane travel and the housing and the just that you're so freaking far, it still ends up costing a fraction of what it would be to go to college down the street from where you grew up.
Yeah.
So why would you not go abroad? I mean, that's why tons of kids are doing that. I can't say if I was a young person, I probably would. You know,
100%.
I mean, so
100%. Yeah. Why wouldn't you?
We're in a weird.
We're in a very bad space with all of these things because really, as far as I'm concerned, education is it's not a burden. It's an investment in our people. It's an investment in the working class in this country. It's an investment in science. It's an investment on so many things. So the fact that we've decided that we don't need to make that investment is really problematic. And I would also include with that financing of trade schools. I don't think everybody needs to get a PhD in biology to be able to get a decent paying job. I think that's ridiculous. I think we need to bring back a fully funded trade school system because we've also decimated that as well. I think the overall problem is we are at a space where income inequality has hit an all-time high. We are way beyond what it was in the 1920s, right? This is what Jordan likes to call the new Gilded Age, and he's correct. It's worse now than it ever has been. Part and parcel to that is the ever-increasing power of the Platone, right? The more they extract wealth from everybody else, the more they're able to buy more power, right? It's a vicious cycle. I'm going to take more money out of the system by legislating a certain way that benefits me. Once I've done that, I'm going to be able to take more money. And now I'm going to do another spiral that's even tighter of legislation that benefits me. So we've been doing this spiral now, for a good 30 years. We're now at a place where I believe is entirely untenable. It's why we're seeing an increase in civil unrest and political violence out there. It's why we're seeing an increase in fascism in the country. Always a relationship there between.
Yeah, I mean, we have all the early warning signs. We have all of them. And one of them is a disdain for education, a disdain for the arts. I mean, we have all that. We have all of it in droves. So, I mean, yeah, I hope that, and the only way we can start to turn the tide is through just people saying, we're going on strike. We're shutting it down.
Right. It's the one bright spot. We are seeing a reawakening in labor in the country, not just with the UC that's breaking now, but we've seen it with nurses striking. We've seen it with rail workers. We've seen it with Starbucks. We've seen it
other
with
teachers
Amazon.
At other levels.
Right. So that's definitely increasing. And to me, that's a healthy outlet for all the political rage that people are feeling, right? This is a way to channel your political rage into something that is productive, right? So if we are able to see folks win better contracts, better pay, better workers' rights across the board, this would definitely add power to balance out what's happening with the plutonomy.
So you're saying like arguing on Twitter all day like isn't the best way to bring about change?
At a time? No.
Oh,
especially now.
Oh, shucks. Crazy.
Especially
should we get to the super chats? We're kind of.
Let's get to the. Yes, we are gonna. We are at the top of the hour, so we're gonna do the super chats. Go through those now with Ron, and then Ron, you're gonna stay with me at the beginning of Right Wing Insanity Report to go through some of the crazy video I pulled up for the week. So
all
let's do super chats.
So let's start. Humorous, thank you so much for your very generous. Thank you so much. Humorous gave $300, which thank you so much for that. You help keep the show on the air. Keep in mind, folks, when you support Status Coup, when you're a member of Status Coup, you're funding journalism. You're funding Jordan's ability and Tina's ability and who's the other guy that's been doing a lot of Lewis. Yeah. Status Lou. That's right. I still haven't met him. I need to ask him if he likes that nickname. But Status Lou, I mean, it's right there. You gotta reach out and grab it. But Status Lou, Tina, Jordan, it enables
sometimes
them.
John still, So
sometimes John. Hopefully I'm gonna be showing up to some stuff. It enables people to go on the ground to bring you stories that the corporate media is not bringing you. They're not telling you what's going on in Flint. They're not telling you what's going on with the labor strikes. They're not. I mean, have they even brought up the stripper strike? I think it took forever, and I think there's been like one article from the corporate media. It's been going on for months and months and months.
Now,
so you're help funding on the ground journalism that is bringing stories to you that no one else is bringing you, and then we're able to use that content to curate stories for you on these streams. So statuscoup.com/join, and of course your super chat contributions are infinitely helpful these days. So Humorous, thank you so much. It is considerably easier, says Humorous, than you think. The president, any president, could simply declare this country a national disaster. Okay, all of our infrastructure is failing. That is not a lie. No, it isn't.
That is not a lie. No lie detected.
That is a national disaster. I'm with you. At that point, the president has unlimited executive authority until the disaster is fixed. I wish well, there's many reasons, but that is one of the reasons why I really wish Bernie Sanders was president right now, because he would have done a lot of executive orders that Biden wouldn't even consider. Right. And we'd be in a much better place than we are right now.
I agree.
We still have a long list of problems, and Bernie would definitely, do some things that pissed all of us off as far as giving in. But he would definitely do some executive orders that Biden wouldn't even consider. And, and if something like that ever happened where a president did that, I wouldn't want it to be someone like Joe Biden or Donald Trump. I want it to be.
Because that could be bad. You're right.
Who knows what Biden would do if Biden declared it a national disaster? What would he do with unlimited executive authority? I mean, probably whatever Comcast tells him to do. Right. Who knows what he would do? But interesting, very interesting point there. Christian 999, what's up? Do you really think that the most powerful country in the history of the world can't tame inflation? Exactly, right?
No, I don't. I absolutely don't. Exactly.
Ron preached because it's all a bunch of BS. I'm with you. Yeah. Humorous again. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Humorous.
I honestly can't believe that no one understands what I've been saying for over 30 years. My friends, you are all slaves. You just don't know it because you cannot see the bars and the chains that bind you. Ooh. Getting deep. Humorous again. Thank you so much. The larger the government, the more powerful the people have. The smaller the government, the less power people have. Where do you think we all are? The GOP has been taking away the power of the people and giving it to corporations forever. Exactly. Humorous goes on to say, voting is not the only way to fix everything. Very true. Actually, it's the least. I agree with that.
I agree.
You know, I mean, I've said it on this show. I've said it elsewhere. I mean, I just voted. I mean, I encourage people to vote, but it is one small tool in the toolkit for change. And let's be honest, it's a super over-amplified one.
It is. Over-amplified is a good way to describe it. It can produce change, and people should not wipe it out and say I'm not going to do it. But I
encourage people to do it, but
it will never change. Yeah, I agree.
Well, and even the change it can bring, our priorities are asked backwards. You know, your vote has the most power locally. That's where your vote has the most power.
I agree.
You know, the one thing there wasn't anything federally that I was excited to vote for on the ballot, because the few people I'm excited about on the national scale, they're not, you know, I'm not able to vote for them anyway. You know, I mean, like the state assembly person in my district, I was excited to vote for Fatima. That was it.
Oh yeah,
that's as high as I got. Yeah, she's great. That's as high as I got as far as I'm excited to vote for this person. Everything else was local, you know? Yeah. So anyway, so Humorous, you're absolutely right. Voting's not the only way. It's actually, you know, one of the smaller ways. It's the least compared to strikes, compared to protests, compared to, you know, a united labor front that's not going to take it anymore. Humorous, what's up? Public broadcasting has always been and always will be the truth of the people. Yeah, I mean, if it's real public broadcasting, unfortunately.
Yeah, public service. News is public service. I mean, it's tragic, actually, that used to be the standard bearer, and it's just not anymore.
Well, now like, there's Coke money there now. Like, I mean, now it's like, so really, I mean, the modern day public broadcasting is stuff like this. It's independent journalists, you know, that are just trying to get the truth to people and trying to tell stories that need to be told. I mean, it's a shame that there's not a public infrastructure to support this stuff, but there isn't. So, you know, we're on our own, and we need your
It's very whittled away. I mean, there are a few local, like,
so, I mean, it is so diminished that
it's diminished from what it used to be.
And it's terrible compared to other countries. It's freaking terrible. I mean, a lot of other countries do a much better job than we do as far as just the health of their media structures and that they view journalism as a public good. I'm not saying anyone's perfect, but there's a hell of a lot better models than us. A hell of a lot better. Humorous, again, thank you so much.
Wow, very generous today. Thank you, Humorous.
We really thank you so much. It is not the federal government that is broken. It is the people by the people for the people that is broken, because they are puppets and owned by the oligarchs. They are no longer for the people. That's true. I mean, we really do have just a banana republic set up, and it's like, what do you think you're going to get when Wall Street owns both parties?
Right.
They got
and a lot of folks are
completely.
Yeah, Ron, a lot of people are completely oblivious to what's in charge, and they're just doing these actions, not like really thinking about how it might be beneficial to some folks way up there at the top in the income world.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you again to Humorous for your very, very generous. Thank you so much. You help make all this possible. Thank you, Christian, for your generosity too. Thank you guys so much. Without your support, we could not continue to exist. So thank you very, very much.
All right. Are we ready for the right-wing insanity report?
Yeah, let's do it.
Let's do it. All right. Right-wing insanity coming up. So at the top of the hour, at the top of the show, we like to look at some clips that are in the media this week that really showcase right-wing insanity. So right off the top, I want to talk about Sorbo, Kevin Sorbo, the actor. Two things that he had out this week. First,
let's put the guy, he's like a big Trumper, right?
Yes.
Okay, all right.
I didn't realize that.
Sometimes I mix up. Yeah, anyway.
So he has a new film that just came out, Ron. And it's called I Can't Breathe. Can we put that up, Colin? Yeah.
It's called I Can't Breathe?
It's called I Can't Breathe.
God forgive them.
God forgive them. I just, no, wait. This is one of the most...
It's a faith-based film.
This is one of the most offensive things I've ever seen. I did go to Amazon and look it up, and I watched the trailer for you, so you won't have to watch it.
Wait, you mean a faith-based film called God Forgive Them didn't like reel you in? You weren't like, oh, I gotta see this.
because wait for it. In a modern story of Job, an overzealous police officer kills an innocent man who relies on his faith to overcome many hurdles and struggles. So basically what they're saying is the overzealous, murderous cop who kills the innocent man is the victim, and we're going to follow his storyline through about how he struggles with his faith after what he did. Are you kidding me with this? This is an actual movie, folks.
Wow. You know, it's so interesting.
I can't breathe. He can't breathe. You just choked out an innocent man, but the cop is like, I'm the victim and I can't breathe.
That's
just so we're clear on what this is saying.
That's so evil. They're using, I mean, that was Eric Garner, right? I Can't Breathe was Eric Garner, because they choked him out for allegedly selling Lucy cigarettes. They don't even know that that's what he was doing. That's what they claimed he was doing. They choked him to death for it. And right in broad daylight. So they took that and they made a propaganda film. That's evil.
Yeah,
that's just pure evil.
It's messed up. It's so many levels of messed up. I'm still processing it, to be frank.
Yeah.
It's so bad I couldn't even play the trailer on this show. So that's how bad it is.
I don't blame you. I mean that's just straight up an evil.
And as if that isn't enough, put up the next one, Colin. If that's not enough. He's partnering with a group called, wait for it, Patriot Mobile. Use promo code SORBO for free activation. America's only Christian conservative wireless provider.
Are the cops on speed dial? Is that one of the perks you get? Are they your only contact in your dumb phone? Everybody says that, like, oh, it's so hard. I mean, or not everybody, but like you'll hear grumblings from like the Vince Vaughns and the Kevin Sorbos, even, I'm sure, where they're like, you don't understand. It's so hard being a conservative in Hollywood. No, it isn't, because you have outlets like that will make garbage like that. There is plenty of right-wing garbage in Hollywood. It's definitely represented. It's way harder. Like, it is by far the hardest to be a lefty in Hollywood, because you have no deep pockets.
Right.
There's no deep pockets for lefties in Hollywood, because like the main Hollywood political ideology is just sort of like centrism, you know, so it's just sort of like centrism's like and that if you're like right wing, you have your kind of like lane. Lefties got nothing. There's like a handful of us who are like kind of whispering to each other, like, oh man, okay.
Yeah, I mean, the majority of Hollywood is neoliberal. I mean,
it's very neoliberal. Yeah, it's 100%. Very neoliberal, very like, I mean, I know people who literally, they voted for Liz Warren, not because they thought she was the best candidate in the primary, but because they realized, I'm not going to get rehired on a certain staff if I vote for Bernie Sanders. So yeah, that's Hollywood. It's very neoliberal. It's very, it's very like centrist Dem. That's the lay of the land. But
corporate.
If you're far right, very corporate. If you're far right, you definitely have your lane though. There's like the GOP lane, like that's all there too. If you're an actual lefty, it's like, dude, we got like, what do we got? We got like Adam McKay. That's Susan Sarandon. I mean, we have a handful of actors and actresses. Yeah. As far as like houses go, like Adam McKay, by far the biggest one. That's all we got. One place.
Yeah. So yeah, the right wingers are definitely saying they're victims, but they're not. All right. Marjorie Taylor Greene had a bit of hypocrisy moment this week. Colin, let's play that video.
But for our government just to say, okay, well, your debt is completely forgiven. Obviously, they have an agenda for that. They need votes in November. So the timing is a pure coincidence there as well. But it's completely unfair. And taxpayers all over the country, taxpayers that never took out a student loan, taxpayers that pay their bills and maybe even never went to college or just hardworking people, they shouldn't have to pay off the great big student loan debt for some college student that piled up massive debt going to some Ivy League school. That's not fair.
So Marjorie Taylor Greene had PPE loans forgiven.
Yep. Yeah.
So this is a prime example. Yeah. 183,504 was the total on her PPE loan forgiveness. So this is somebody that is happy to have the government forgive her loans, but
for
God
me,
forbid.
But not for thee.
Yeah.
And it's just, I mean, it is such a bullshit trope the way they
It's so
sell. And by the
bullshit.
way, the whole like, well, it's not fair to these rich kids that went to Ivy League schools. They took on the. I mean, most people that hold student debt are working.
Didn't go to
people, 'cause
Ivy
guess what?
League and
They
didn't
didn't go to Ivy League
schools.
because guess
Like,
what?
it's
Rich
ludicrous.
kids get their college paid for
That's right.
already.
Most people at
And-
Ivy League are not taking on debt.
And
It's
by the
other
way,
revenue.
let's be honest, that like bullshit talking point that Marjorie Taylor Greene used, that was actually like a talking point that could be traced back to like Camp Hillary. That was
Probably.
actually a neoliberal bullshit, you know, like
That wouldn't surprise
Democratic
me.
DNC
Yeah.
talking point. Because, you know, Bernie Sanders wanted to forgive student loan debt. You know,
Right.
the Hillary camp didn't. So they were like, oh, well, it's, I don't want to forgive student loan debt for Trump's kids. So it's like that's where they get these freaking talking points. Because at the end of the day, guess what? They're all right wing.
Clintons. Yes, the Clinton camp
right-wing
is third way. They call themselves third way, right? But they are absolutely conservative financially. That's never been up for debate. They were proud of that at one time, right? They adopted all of neoconservative financial principles. So that would not surprise me. All right, Gab. How many people have heard of the social media site Gab, right? So we're talking about social media this week because, you know, what's going on at Twitter. People are looking for new sites to go to. So let's take a look at what the founder of Gab had to say. Can we put up that screenshot? So Andrew Torba is his name. He's the founder of Gab. This is what he said. I would literally shut Gab down before bending the knee to the synagogue of Satan. Gab will never, ever answer to the ADL ever. So it's a very common thing in neo-Nazi world, in right-wing extremist world, to make anti-Semitic claims about Jews being satanic. That's the underlying. In fact, I had a guy in my DMs last week on Twitter calling me a Satanist. So yeah, that's what he had to say about that. Even having the least amount of moderation on a platform.
What spawned him saying that? he just felt like I haven't been anti-Semitic in 20 minutes. I better get to it. Like what? Because I mean, he responded to himself.
Honestly, Rob, that is a fair description of Andrew. To be fair, that is a perfectly fair analysis of him. But I believe my understanding from reading this, that this was a response to what was going on at Twitter, right? So the moderators are gone. People are complaining about that. The brands are leaving. So he's basically saying to these guys, I'm never going to do it over here. Why are you guys even fighting over Twitter? Come join us on Gab, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, looking at it from a marketing standpoint, like, shouldn't someone like him be kind of worried? Because if like all like the Elon Musk, you know, like if everybody's like, oh, we can be racist on Twitter now, let's go.
Right, which is a much bigger platform.
That's bigger, so they're going to leave. Because
I hadn't thought about that, but okay.
Well, I mean, right? Because I mean, you actually are on Gab, right? For journalistic reasons.
Not as me, but yes.
Oh, well, shit.
I have a fake account on there. Let's not out my fake account.
All right. Well, I didn't know that. So I think, isn't that a place? I'm not on it. Me or fake me. I think my cat tried to sign up, but I told her not to. I don't know.
No.
But like, isn't it that's sort of the place for all the people who on every other social media platform, people were like, hey, I don't want to hear your racist bullshit.
Go to Gab.
They don't understand what free speech is, because they're just, I'm just trying to post my racist shit and people are responding saying I'm an asshole. They're going to get, no, that's how free speech works. See, you say what you, but that people don't like it, so they let you know that.
Yeah, they don't want free speech, they want hate speech. That's correct.
That's how it works. So they go to a place like Gab, where it's their, they preach against safe spaces, but isn't that their safe space?
Yeah.
It's their safe space for hate. That's like their jam. So I mean, if they feel like Twitter is going to be their new, like, they'll be like, oh man, we're going mainstream now. So he's probably worried.
Is their jam. So
he's probably worried. He's
Andrew's
like,
worried. Andrew's worried that he might lose some Nazis, huh?
Yeah, he's like, I better turn up the anti-Semite for some marketing. I don't want to lose anybody here. I better remind the masses that I'm a huge asshole, so nobody leaves my dumb platform.
Right. That has far fewer
users.
What a time to exactly. I want to turn now to a right-wing pastor. Her name is Terry Copeland, and she.
I mean, you had me sold at right-wing pastor, but continue.
All right, she's one of these pastors that are very much part of this Christian fascist movement that we're seeing an increase of. Obviously, very politicized. So, prime example, as far as I'm concerned, of why some churches should really lose their 501c3 status because they're doing politics. But let's play this clip.
In the name of the Lord Jesus Christ, Father, by intercession with supplication, we pray over the United States of America and over this election. In the name of the Lord Jesus, by faith we take hold of this nation. Lord, we push back darkness. We push back darkness. We push back darkness. We push back darkness. Darkness, you can't have our people. You can't have our nation. You can't have our election. You can't have our White House. You can't have our Capitol. You can't have our governors. You can't have them. You can't have them.
Be healed.
And seen.
And see, this is real though. I mean, there is an increase of this out there, so I think people need to be aware of it.
Why was she like on her knees dancing around and shit? Like, what was going on? Was she being overcome by the spirit, or like what was
supplication? Yes, I mean, I'm not sure. We would have to get an expert on here to like divide out some of these evangelical groups because it gets a little confusing to me. But
yeah, no, I have trouble. Yeah, it is a racket though. I mean, televangelism has, man.
But it's increasingly politicized and it's increasingly extremist right-wing. And notice that... It always
has been, though. It's just now they can't even hide it as easily. I mean, going back to the 80s, they funded all kinds of messed up shit, trying to, like, impose Christianity. They funded, like, some wars and shit. I mean, it's incredibly seedy what they've been doing for years and years, from, like, Falwell to, like, all those people. I mean,
what worries me now, Ron, is that they're embracing this idea of election fraud already, right? So if God doesn't grant them their wishes that whatever candidate, Carrie Lake or whoever, doesn't win their election, that's going to be satanic involvement. Like I'm going to play a clip next that will sort of kind of bookend this one.
I mean, I don't know. I think if a God's out there, I don't think they give a fuck about the midterms.
I agree with you, but
I don't think there is a God out there. But if there is, I think they're just kind of like, why did you fuck up this planet I gave you? Why did you do like most of the stuff you did here? I'm not helping anymore. You guys, you're on your own. I'm gonna give this 100 years, and if you don't fix shit, you're done. Your tenure's over.
That's it.
Give it someone else a shot. The dinosaurs were being assholes, so you know what I did? I had to fix that. That was your warning, not to be too douche-tastic.
Uh-oh. Does that mean a giant meteor is headed our way?
Maybe. I don't know.
Don't look up.
Yeah. Could be.
Don't look up. All right. Now let's turn to Dr. Sherry Tenpenny, because I had to play this one just because, I mean, typical right-wing anti-vax conspiracy stuff, but she's taken it to a whole nother level. Let's play this clip.
Can you give me a couple of examples of things that you have said that, all of a sudden the media is like, yeah, you know what? That's right.
And when I started looking at what was going to be coming out through these shots in beginning of 2021, and I talked about that what they're trying to do here is a depopulation agenda. This was in early 2021, maybe even at the end of 2020. I said, this is a depopulation agenda. The people who survive it are either going to be customers for life of the pharmaceutical industry, or they are going to move us into the transhumanism movement, connect us up to the Internet of Things, the Internet of Bodies, use it for our carbon footprint, our social credit scores. Everything is going to be tied to what they're doing us and getting people primed to stand in line and get all these boosters. And everybody said, yeah, right, tinfoil hat conspiracy theory. Well, here we are. The other thing was that I said that, these shots beginning in 2021, when I wrote the 40 mechanisms of injury, how the COVID shots can make you sick or kill you. And I found 40 different ways, and this was early in 21, of how these shots can make you sick and kill you, particularly the spike proteins. And everybody go, yeah, when are people going to start dying? I said in about 6 months, and then we're going to see a tsunami of deaths unlike anything we've seen before. Well, here we are.
Yeah. So there you go. And I mean, right there, it's just right in front of people's eyes. But if they don't want to know the truth, they're not going to know the truth. They're going to make a conscious decision to ignore it all.
Okay, there's no tsunami of deaths from the vaccine. I have no idea what that's about. But really, what I thought was so whack about this is, what is this Internet of Things that we're all connected to that's like transhuman? Are we going to become machines now? Like this, the COVID vaccine is doing a lot of work here, Ron. It's doing a lot of work.
No. Here is a formula to make sure you can always claim you were right. Use a bunch of buzzwords, put them in a blender, hit blend, make these kind of vague claims that can be interpreted a bunch of different ways, connected to the Internet of Things. Well, what does that mean?
I don't know. That's what I need to know.
It's part of an agenda. Well, what does that mean? What is even just saying customers of Big Pharma? What does that mean exactly? I mean, yes, Big Pharma has tons of corruption going on, but
100% they do.
But does that mean you don't take medicine?
No.
What does that mean? Like I mean, we are all customers of Big Pharma to some degree. I mean, we all need medicine, and it's not the medicine that's the problem. Like, there's a big scam around EpiPens. It's a complete evil scam what they did and the way they price gouged
insulin. Insulin is another example.
Of course, but that doesn't mean that the EpiPen and the insulin doesn't still save lives. The medicine's not the problem. It's the system around it. So what does her little word salad mean? I mean, you make these vague things that can be interpreted a million ways to Sunday and then be like, see, I freaking said that. I called it. I nailed it. And it also goes to show you that you can have a medical degree and still not be all that trustworthy.
Oh, 100%. I think we've established that.
They're just like, this person's a doctor. Are you freaking smarter than this doctor? Like, well, I mean, I don't know if I'm as good as bullshit, but like, I can tell you this much. There's a handful of scientists who don't think climate change is actually a thing. And even though I'm not a scientist, I do have enough intuition to go look at the broader body of work and conclude on my own that, climate change is a thing. Same thing wherever else, because you know what? And I can say this as someone who went to grad school too. There are some not bright people who have degrees in higher education. It is possible, folks.
It is definitely possible. We've all met them. All right.
And they may be dishonest too. It's not a ticket to honesty either.
No, it is not. All right. Next up, I have a wild end times conspiracy theory. This guy actually has written a book, and he claims that Trump is Christ. Let's play that clip.
President Donald J. Trump. Here you go. You will see that Trump is the Christ, that he is the son of David, King David, and that he is the Son of Man. And when you start reading the scriptures, do yourself a favor. You can take any scripture in the New Testament, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and you will see that Jesus, who is the Son of God, always spoke about the Son of Man, and he referred to the Son of Man in the third person. But whenever Jesus spoke about himself, and he referred to himself, it was always in the first person as the Son of God. There's a huge difference between the Son of God and the Son of Man. People read this Bible, but they don't perceive the differences between Jesus, who is the Son of God, versus Trump, who is the Son of Man. In this book, I don't speak any religion. I just show you the facts, how Trump fulfilled all the scriptures so far as the Son of Man, as the Christ, as the son of King David.
All right, so before we talk about this video clip, let me also preface some of the claims that he makes in this book. I read part of it, so you don't have to. He believes there are multiple parallels that exist between Donald Trump and Jesus Christ. One of them is that Trump's father's middle name is Christ. One is that Trump was betrayed by Pence and Jesus was betrayed by Judas. Another is Jesus denounced false prophets in the same way that Trump decries fake news. He thinks Joseph of Arimathea is compared to Mike Lendl, Mr. Pillow Guy, because they're both billionaires or something. And then, of course, there's tons of anti-Semitic references. He's from South Africa, so he believes apartheid should be brought back. So he's obviously a racist.
But Jesus had at least 12 friends. Where are Trump's 12 friends?
I didn't ask him
I'm
that.
finding some holes here. I also think there are some holes as far as how they were both born. I'm pretty sure, like, I don't know. Again,
no
like,
immaculate birth with the Trump. Yeah, no. I
mean,
listen,
not only that, but I'm pretty sure, like, Trump wasn't born. I mean, I don't know. Do you remember the story? Jesus was born and his dad handed him $1 million. I don't remember it going that way. I think it was like, no, he was born in a manger or whatever, right? That's the story. That's the story. I mean, look. This guy, if his book does well, you got to hand it to him. He's a freaking marketing genius. I mean, think about it. And by the way, he's not the first. He won't be the last. The Bible, the best-selling book of all time. It's also in the public domain. So you can make unlimited fan fiction based on this freaking book. I mean, man, what a freaking racket. And you can go, oh, I think that Trump is the Christ figure. And there's going to be people who are like, holy shit. He's right. There's going to be other people who are like, holy shit, curiosity's getting the best of me, and I'm going to give this guy money. And he's laughing all the way to the bank. Or he's actually that nuts, which
he is.
I mean,
I think he's that nuts, honestly. But listen, he's not the only one. There was a billboard put up, if I'm going to throw back now to 2021, in Chattanooga, Tennessee. So someone else put up a billboard claiming that
someone
Trump
stole
was
the
Christ.
idea, Tina. This is all right. So there's a whole like market for like the Trump is Christ circuit.
Yes.
And one of them is hacking off the other. And we got to get to the bottom of this. I mean, someone should have copyrighted this immediately. Someone should have trademarked it. No. The Trump is Christ racket. That's me. That's my freaking thing. I'm doing an entire series. I already got something in pre-production. What do you got? A little book that you printed in your basement? I'm taking you to task.
You're taking me to task for all of this. So we're getting some super chats as we're still live. We appreciate that. Humorous.
People think that Trump is Christ?
Trump is Christ. No, humorous. We don't need a giant meteor. If anyone ever paid attention to the book that they all believe in, their God said that I won't do anything anymore. You will destroy your own selves by following the wide path to destruction.
Was that in Revelation? I mean, I don't know. I've read the Bible before.
No, but it sounds like about where we're headed right now, to be fair. I mean,
that's fair. Yeah.
And then we have Kay. Thank you, Kay, for $20. We appreciate that.
Garrett, thank you very, very much.
Oh, Kat, you're right. Sorry.
There's a Faye there. Yeah, the wife. I've called her Kay before, too. It's like... I
have a weird eye thing where I can see really good up to a certain level and then far away I can't. So for me to do the broadcast is better for me to not have my...
weird. You know, I think that's called farsighted. I think it's very.
It is, but for like but then when I want to read, I need to get a monitor closer here so I can read these things better. So peace, Robert Walker. Tina, you are an angelic journalistic warrior. Thank you, Robert. I appreciate that. $2.
Don't give away your code name.
Don't give away my code name, right? That's good. And humorous. Again, you are so generous today. It's amazing.
Thank you, humorous. Thank you so much.
All of you who are mocking Satanists or Satanism, you might want to look into their bylaws before you speak, because the reality is a much more moral one than the God reality in the Old Testament. Yeah, you know what? Church of Satan actually isn't even about Satan, like a biblical idea of Satan. So it's kind of an interesting movement. I agree. In fact, we should maybe do a show once on that. All right.
I mean, I don't know a ton about it, to be honest with you. I know, like, I do have a couple friends that join kind of as a gag, you know, like just to sort of like, but
it's not this whole pentagram.
No, I know it's not that. It's like Anton LaVey, but it's basically like Ayn Rand. Like,
is it?
Really,
I don't know. Okay.
A lot of it. Well, even Anton LaVey, like, I think he said that at one point. He's like, yeah, this is basically just like Ayn Rand.
I'm not down with Ayn Rand. She's kind of a
No, I'm not either. No,
all right.
She's anyway. But
anyway, on that note, so that's the opening clips we're going to go through. Now I'm going to turn to our interview.
Oh wait, let me flip my tour days before I leave.
Okay. Wow, we should have done that earlier before. Okay, but go.
Well, I always do it at the end. All right, so go to ronplacone.com. You can follow me on Twitter at ronplacone and on other social platforms too. And who knows what's next? I'm on the TikTok. I'm on the Instagram. And I got some tour dates. January 28th, I'll be in Tucson, Arizona. You can grab tickets now at ronflacone.com. Use the promo code Lucy at checkout for an early bird special, and that's not going to go on forever. So Tucson, get your tickets now. It's a Saturday night, and there's going to be a stand-up show and a screening of my short film Loner. So it's going to be a fun night. I'll be in San Diego February 17th and 18th, and I will have more tour dates soon. That includes Los Angeles, Chicago, Minneapolis, Detroit, Indianapolis, and the UK. So that'll be announced very, very soon. And yeah, see y'all next time.
We have one more super chat from Humorous before I play the Mike German interview. Humorous, you know a lot more about this than I do. Okay, Jesus in Matthew 25, I believe I told Peter, don't believe in the leaven of the Pharisees. The vernacular says, don't believe in the rise of this religion. I find no one of religion that actually follows what they're supposed to, what supposed God says. This is true. I mean, it's like that Gandhi quote, I like your Christ, I dislike your Christians. They're so unlike your Christ. That's probably true of a lot of religions.
Well, but he was like against public prayer and stuff too. Jesus was. Like, I think it was like Matthew 5:6, where he was like against public prayer and he was against, I mean, the only time he ever got mad was at capitalists. That's the only time. That is the fact. That the only time the historic Jesus ever got mad was at bankers and capitalists.
In the
only time. Only time. Never got mad at a gay person. Never got mad at a sex worker. In fact, he hung out with them. Never got mad at a sick person. He helped them. Got mad at capitalists and bankers. I'm just saying.
No, you're not wrong. Saying. True story.
I'm not even a believer, but that's what happened. That's what happened. According to y'all's book.
It's true. It's true. All right, let's listen to my interview with Mike German, the ex-FBI agent who was undercover with right-wing extremists in the 90s and then went on to become an FBI whistleblower and now works at the Brennan Center of Justice. I'm Tina-Desiree Berg, reporting for Status Coup News. This week on Right Wing Insanity Report, we are speaking with Mike German. Mike is an ex-FBI agent that was undercover with right-wing extremists back in the 90s, and he's currently a fellow at the Brennan Center of Justice. Welcome, Mike.
Thanks for having me.
I'm actually very excited to talk to you because you've had a lifelong experience working with, dealing with, and infiltrating right-wing extremists. I'm not sure the extent that you can talk about your undercover work in the 90s, but can you share a little bit about that?
Sure. So my first undercover assignment was to investigate white supremacists who were manufacturing and trafficking in illegal arms in the wake of the civil unrest following the police beating of Rodney King, where they were expecting there to be further violence that they were hoping they could trip into a larger race war. So they're manufacturing machine guns. Within that investigation, we uncovered a group that was actually already doing bombings, and we solved those bombings and recovered other explosive devices. And then later in the 90s, after the Oklahoma City bombing, we saw groups start to identify more as militia rather than white supremacists, even though it was the same type of criminal activity, same type of groups. I actually presented myself as a disaffected white supremacist skinhead who was looking for a new group and sort of set myself up to be recruited into the group, but engaging in the same type of criminal activity, the manufacture and trafficking of illegal weapons and the manufacture of explosives.
So, and at that time it was, correct me if I'm wrong, it was like the Nazi lowriders, I think, were prevalent here in Los Angeles. The hammer skins, of course, they've been around, the Golden State skins. But were they all pretty much dealing with trafficking guns? I know drugs has also been a common theme with these groups. Is this what they do to make money, or is the white supremacy more of a side thing that they believe?
Well, the groups we were in, white supremacy was the driving influence, and their criminal activity was in furtherance of creating more racial tension to create a race war. And with the militias, it was a little bit different, but basically exploiting current events in a way that justified their victimization and therefore their authority to go out and commit violence of their own because they saw themselves as victims. And that's a recurrent theme through this. Now, like any criminal organization, they engage in other types of drug trafficking or other criminal activities to support their ideology. And this was sometimes a question in law enforcement, how to characterize these groups, right, which just seems sort of silly to me. It's like you would have a spectrum. Well, this guy is more interested in drug dealing than, which if you parse it that way, makes the whole concept of this type of activity fall apart, because of course everybody has multiple motives for what they do throughout their lives, and it's really hard to parse, were you 50% because of this motive and 25% because of that motive? It's kind of a silly exercise where, what I thought then and continue to profess is to treat them just like any other organized criminal group.
Right, which has not always been the case in the past. Right-wing extremism has sort of been ignored a long time by law enforcement. I think January 6th has changed quite a bit of that, but there was definitely a focus more on the left. I think of Timothy McVeigh when you talk about that, because he went down to Waco, Texas. He was also a prolific reader of the Turner Diaries, which is a white supremacy handbook. You see them often talking about the Turner Diaries, Day of the Rope, which is when Day of the Rope is when all the folks that they disparage, Black folks, indigenous folks, Jewish folks, whatever, they end up, hanging them. So it's a horrific novel, but it's one that a lot of white supremacists read. And obviously he was very much right-wing militia and anti-government, which is what motivated his bombing. But there was definitely a white supremacy hairline running through him.
Absolutely. And again, and it was interesting as well, because it's not just law enforcement, it's also in the media in many cases where, there were enough ties to white supremacy and white supremacist groups in the Oklahoma City bombing, and yet the media characterized them as militia rather than white supremacists. And I see the same dynamic happening with the January 6th attack on the Capitol, where the Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers are both in the charging and in the media seen as the drivers there, but there were a whole lot of white supremacists there.
100%, yeah.
And, I don't think they just happened to be in DC on that day, all at the same time in the same place.
Right.
And yet you don't see either the media or law enforcement really treating this as a white supremacist attack, which is somewhat frustrating, because the Proud Boys, of course, many of the different chapters openly profess their white supremacy, and yet it's still thought that the group itself is not, when I don't think that's accurate.
No, it's not accurate. And, part of the problem, Andy Campbell and I were talking about this very thing. Part of the problem is a lot of folks in media aren't really familiar or know enough about what they're reporting on. So when one of these guys says, hey, we're just a drinking organization, they're like, okay, cool. When in reality, I've seen videos of many of these Proud Boys, not only, saying 1488, which is, a neo-Nazi slogan. I have a video of one of them from Ohio standing in front of a swastika and talking about how horrible the Jewish folks are that control the media. So yeah, these guys are most certainly white nationalists in the very least, if not full-blown white supremacists. So there is a correlation there. And what's interesting is you're right. It's been ignored by both the media and by law enforcement. I'd say January 6th has changed quite a bit, at least on the federal level. There's a renewed focus on looking at that. But when it comes to local law enforcement, there still seems to be a big disconnect. Would you think that's accurate?
Well, I think the second part is accurate, that there is a disconnect at the state and local level, but I think there's also a disconnect at the federal level. All
right, let's talk about that.
So if you look at the January 6th prosecutions, they heavily front-loaded the most minor charges, lots of misdemeanors for trespassing. Okay. When I saw that as a crucial mistake right from the very beginning, number one, because it plays into the theme on the right that this was just a protest that went wrong, rather than recognizing it it took almost a year for them to start laying sedition charges
out.
against these groups. And, we can discuss the sedition charges, but, certainly it was a conspiracy that brought all these violent people there to commit an act of violence. And you didn't have to have any intelligence apparatus to have determined this, right? The Hotel Harrington shut down for those days. How did the Hotel Harrington know what was going to happen?
They knew.
And the federal government didn't, right?
Right.
They're also framing January 6th in the charging documents as a standalone event, right? That's
a problem. I agree. That's a huge problem.
That they're ignoring the violence the Proud Boys, the Oath Keepers, the others in the mix committed before January 6th. And I think they're ignoring that because it plays into their argument that they were caught by surprise. But more concerning to me is they don't seem to have changed the way they're approaching the local violence that Proud Boys and other far-right groups are engaging in. And you don't have, for those videos, you don't have to look in the past, right? Just this past weekend, we saw violence at Penn State. We saw violence at UC Davis. So, where Proud Boys are engaging in that same kind of behavior to provoke this violence, and there doesn't seem to be a recognition that one, these are intentionally provocative for the purpose of creating violence, and number two, that it's organized. That this is, oftentimes what we saw in the period before January 6th, and I'm sure is still the case today, is that you see these militants, far-right militants, traveling across state lines to engage, and that's usually the type of activity that the FBI gets interested in, right? Once you cross a state line, it brings federal jurisdiction. So usually when you see an organized violent criminal group crossing state lines and conspiring over state lines, the FBI is very interested, but you don't see that. I'm not aware of significant prosecutions since January 6th that target these groups. And the reason, or let me start, the failure of federal law enforcement to address that organized violence before January 6th is what allowed them to have developed the logistics and the networks and the financing
necessary
to get a mass of people together on January 6th.
Mike, that's a really excellent point, because I think to myself quite often, could January 6th been stopped before it happened? And I think the answer to that is yes, but people were not paying attention to the warning signs, right? So if you were a journalist out there on the street and you were attending any of these Trump rallies, which is, let's just talk about that for a second. It's bizarre that a sitting president has continued to have rallies after he's won an election. Usually rallies are, you have them before the election, you're trying to get your base fired up, attract new voters, whatnot. But this guy had supporters out there having weekly rallies, after he won the presidency. So that was strange in and of itself. And most of them did become very violent. And if you were in any of these Telegram chat rooms, you could see that they were planning these things. They weren't just, organically happening at these sites. So the writing was definitely on the wall. I remember seeing, in fact, just various protests where the LAPD would have a skirmish line only facing in one direction. And that would be BLM or the anti-fascists, never facing out the Trump supporters. And you would see guys behind them with like baseball bats, bear spray, twice a handgun. I saw knives. I've seen people stabbed by some of these guys. It's crazy that this is the case. So what I'm getting at is, from the 90s, you experienced this, you were undercover, you saw that these guys were dangerous back then. How is it that 25 years on, that hasn't been corrected the way we view right-wing extremists?
So I think one of the things that we need to keep in mind is that there are agents and analysts on the ground who are seeing this and are reporting it up the chain of command. And it's the FBI managers, and I'm sure the managers at these other institutions that are deciding that that's not where we're going to put resources, right? And obviously with the January 6th information, we've seen that there were FBI warnings coming up through the chain of command. And, I don't think we have a lot of visibility into the FBI's decision making yet. Hopefully that will continue to come out, and the trials are bringing out that even things like the Oath Keeper's initial conspiracy call was recorded and sent to the FBI, and they didn't even look at it before January 6th. So
that's stunning.
Clearly, they had plenty of information, and again, you didn't need to have an intelligence agency, right? I don't have those talents or authorities anymore. I just monitor what local reporters are publishing about these activities, and because video is ubiquitous now, you can almost sit in your living room and watch every protest across the country. And I could even identify the people who were involved. I didn't need captions to tell me who this was. And many of them had criminal records. So these weren't people who were unknown to the police. They knew them as a part of the criminal element, yet somehow protected them when they were engaging in violence against people that the police didn't like. And that's where the problem is. And we've recently seen an FBI agent suspended because he wouldn't participate in a SWAT raid on a January 6th defendant. And, other expressions of sympathy for the January 6th rioters. And,
that's not good.
An email that recounted a conversation with a Joint Terrorism Task Force representative who said that 70% of the task force has sympathy for the rioters. So there's clearly a problem within the FBI, and worse, a problem within FBI management that doesn't want to acknowledge these crimes. It's fascinating. I started writing reports about the deficient law enforcement response to this problem after Charlottesville. And one of the things that I kept saying is, as even as the FBI director, Christopher Wray, or others in the FBI started saying that they were going to take white supremacist violence more seriously or domestic terrorism more seriously, they still don't have or track incidents that they consider domestic terrorism. So they don't know how many people white supremacists kill in the United States each year. And that was true in 2017 after Charlottesville, and it's still true, that this violence isn't viewed as a national security threat by the intelligence community and the FBI.
Which is crazy to me, because I think it's the gravest threat that our democracy faces on so many levels.
Absolutely, and you would think that as a law enforcement, and they like to characterize themselves as a domestic intelligence agency, that they would at least be keeping track of these attacks, and yet they don't. And that's a purposeful choice that they're making, and it's a huge part of the problem, because you can't measure the effectiveness of the FBI's programming if you're not actually counting the incidents.
Right. So what I'm hearing is there's a giant disconnect between, the street level agents that actually do care about this stuff and how it gets transferred up and how the brass handles it. In fact, so I want to bring up your book. I know you've written 2 books. I'm in the process of reading your other book, but I did finish reading this. I loved it.
Oh, good. Thank you.
And you do a really great job talking about what it's like, the frustrations that you're talking about. If you're an agent, you're a street agent out there, and you see these things and they're a problem and you want to do something about them, but your boss's boss lies about stuff. Or in one case, I think you even mentioned that he used whiteout on one of your reports, which is just like, that's crazy to me. So do they not understand that this fundamentally disrupts what law and order is supposed to be? They think that they're keeping law and order in place, but really at the end of the day, if people don't trust the law enforcement, you need that public trust in order to function properly and to maintain law and order. It's an important part of it. And we're losing that for obvious reasons.
Right. And the FBI has always been somewhat impervious to outside criticism because the FBI doesn't a tremendous amount of very necessary and effective work in communities all across the United States. And if you're an elected representative, you need to have a good relationship with the FBI in order to make sure that your constituents' concerns are being addressed, crime concerns, and all types of different criminal activity. So it's hard to be very harsh in your general criticism of the FBI and then go to them and say, hey, you know, we're having this crime problem. Can you help us? And the other thing is because, you know, the FBI is a story generator for journalists, right? If
this is true,
right, that, you know, because a lot of that good work is very exciting stories about criminals and the great agents who go and chase them down and protect society from them. So journalists don't really want to make the FBI angry with them or be seen as hypercritical of the FBI because they're afraid they'll lose that access.
Right. That's fair.
So it becomes very difficult for the public to get information. And even members of Congress routinely complain that their requests for information are stonewalled. And it takes them years. And, you know, my case, you know, I came out as a whistleblower in 2004. The documents that proved what I was saying were true, the FBI didn't release until 2007. So and what that does for that slow walking of compliance with congressional requests basically makes every provable story of abuse an old story.
Right. By the time it comes out. Yeah, that's by design.
This is activity that happened in 2002. And, you know, by now everybody's been transferred. Nobody is still in that position. You know, no individuals will be held responsible because they're not around anymore. And they're able to just escape any kind of critical oversight. And I think that's what needs to change. And Congress
I agree.
Get together.
I agree. You know, and it's really difficult because you lose the good agents that way, right? And so why do you think it is that those that do filter all the way up to the top management positions are the ones more likely? Is that just by design that this happens, or they're friends of friends and there's just a lot of that sort of I'm promoting my friends, he's got my back kind of a thing going on? Like, what are the root causes of that? Because it seems to me that no group is monolithic, right? There's good actors and bad actors in every group. And we need to find ways to, you know, protect the good actors and while punishing the bad ones. And that just doesn't seem to be happening.
Part of the problem is the FBI. The FBI's management system is broken. When I was a new agent in the early 90s, Director William Sessions ordered a comprehensive review of FBI systems and management. And there was a very critical report that came out of it. But before the report was published, and I don't think it's ever been published publicly, and I've never been able to find anyone who's interested in actually getting it, because I think it really identified the real problems. But in the meantime, William Sessions had been fired by President Bill Clinton. So the FBI managers whose investment in the current system made them opposed to any kind of changes were able to successfully kind of bury that report and not make any of the changes it recommended. A similar evaluation, not quite as comprehensive, was conducted in 2000 by Arthur Andersen.
Arthur Andersen, that's interesting.
But it was about the time that the Justice Department indicted the Arthur Andersen in the Enron scandal. So again, they were able to bury a report that has never seen public exposure. I saw it referenced in one IG report, Inspector General report, but otherwise it hasn't. That actually describe these problems. But you have to understand that the people who have invested in this system and made all the deals to climb the ladder don't want to see that ladder changed into something that would require objective evidence of your good management skills, right? So it stays a system where who you know is more important than what you've done.
Right. So this sort of ultimately this plays into the perception that a lot of activists share, which is that it can't be reformed because the system is just broken entirely. And if it's a broken system, there's no good players in a broken system, right? Some people view it that way. can it be reformed? I mean, it seems to me that it's very politicized, but it also seems to me there are people that care about having a functioning, federal investigation force. And, like when you ask abolitionists, for example, and I've had this conversation with lots of them, do you just not want to have any police? None of them say yes to that. They all pretty much say, no, well, of course not. We want people to investigate, serial killers, murderers, and things of this nature. So I think there's just a lot of stuff gets lost in the conversation. And if we're really having a critical conversation of what we want to see our society as, we do want somebody there to protect us and to look at, serious crime. What people don't want, however, is a politicized law enforcement that's biased in its policing, only cracking down on one side because of their political personal biases, or a system that targets individuals because they're minority groups instead of, like, for example, the right-wing extremists that we're talking about.
And one of the things to keep in mind is the FBI is a very small agency. It's smaller than the Department of Commerce, right?
It's not huge.
You don't really feel the influence of the Department of Commerce every day.
Right.
Although I imagine they would argue that every time you go shopping, you do feel the impact of their work. But its outsized influence is because of the powers that we give it. And I think we do have a power to modify its behavior by limiting those powers. And part of the problem before, during the reign of J. Edgar Hoover is that there was no written rule book for what authorities the FBI had.
Right.
And part of the reforms after Hoover died and the Church Committee exposed a lot of the political abuses was to focus the FBI on criminal activity, where you had to have what's called a criminal predicate. Articulable facts, given a reasonable indication that a crime has occurred, will occur, or will occur in the future. And I found that a very effective standard, particularly when I was working with white supremacist groups, working undercover, and everybody who's within a group of Nazis is saying very scary things, right?
Yeah.
Saying things that personally offended me and that I thought were really dangerous ideas. But having that requirement that I document the reasonable indication of criminal activity helped me keep those investigations focused where the best evidence was. And I think the reason those cases were successful and were relatively short term, one was 14 months, the other was a little more than 8 months, was because we were sharply focused on the individuals who were committing crimes rather than the people who were saying scary things, but perhaps never committed a crime. And unfortunately, after 9/11, those requirements were removed so that now agents can investigate people that they believe are a danger to society because of the ideas they express or because of their activism, rather than focusing on criminal activity. And just the fact that they don't even count the bodies that are victims of white supremacist violence, I think highlights that.
Yeah.
And if you look at,
I think you're right.
And part of this is the way we characterize these crimes. And so for instance, if a white supremacist kills somebody, the FBI might say that's an act of domestic terrorism. And if so, there would be a lot of resources devoted to it. The investigation would be very broad, targeting anybody associated with that person who might have aided them. More likely, they'll consider it a hate crime, particularly because white supremacists often target people because of racial bias. Religious bias. So if they characterize it as a hate crime, the Justice Department policy is to defer it to state and local law enforcement, even though they know state and local law enforcement
does nothing
often acknowledge these crimes. And some states don't even have hate crime laws. So it's a flawed mechanism, which again, even as the FBI and the Justice Department have claimed to have a renewed focus on far-right violence, they still have this policy in place. And they still acknowledge that only a small percentage of police departments actually report that hate crimes occur within their jurisdictions. But more often, and this is fascinating to me, the Justice Department actually does very good work investigating white supremacist violence under the Violent Crimes Program.
Okay.
And you know, we don't have objective data from the FBI, so I don't, or the Justice Department. We've tried to get that data through the Brennan Center Freedom of Information Act requests, but when they characterize it as violent crimes, it's often worked by the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, or even the DEA,
Right.
and they engage in cases that involve raids that arrest 30, 40, 50, 80 people at a time. Right. They recover serious weapons. They solve violent crimes, including hate crimes. And yet you don't hear the Justice Department bragging about those cases. It's fascinating. Those cases.
It is fascinating.
You know, so where this is good work, this is work that they could point to and say, hey,
exactly.
we are examining this. But I think it's because they don't want that to be part of the domestic terrorism conversation. They still
Which
want
that blows my mind, Mike, because to me, this is the domestic terrorism conversation. This is it, this right here. And, you know, I've witnessed hate crimes. I have filmed hate crimes, and I have seen no justice for the individuals that were the victims. And I'm very frustrated, right? And I'm listening to you talk about this. And you're right. The local law enforcement basically told one of the victims that she could file a citizen's arrest. I mean, you would only do that if you thought there was no probable cause, right? And I'm like, no, here's the video of these folks attacking her, and they ripped off her weave, and one of them literally held the weave in the air and said, "This is the first scalping of the new Civil War." That doesn't. There's nothing more hate crimey than that, in my opinion.
Absolutely, and you know, we have strong evidence from leaked different social media platforms that white supremacists and far right militants gravitate to, that are, you know, lucky for us, very leaky and expose this information. But you don't see law enforcement taking advantage of that, right? I mean, it's fascinating to me how there's this confusion about why federal law enforcement wasn't prepared for January 6th. When the same thing happened in 2017 at the Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville, where it was
how were they not prepared? Yeah,
you had 100%. People with criminal records associating with white supremacist groups traveling across country for the purpose of engaging in violence, engaging in that violence, and traveling home without any federal law enforcement intervention. The only federal case was the homicide committed by Alex Fields, where he ran his car into Heather Heyer.
Right.
You know, and it took 4 years for litigators, for civil litigators, to use the Discord chats that had leaked to show the overall conspiracy and get a civil judgment against the organizers. That information could have been available to the FBI day one.
That's right.
And in fact, day zero, you know, negative 15, right? There was plenty of evidence that these people, that many of the people involved had engaged in previous violence.
100%. And they were talking about engaging in more violence at Charlottesville. When you read the Discord leaks on that group, it's like.
Right. And this is, you know, what frustrated me so much, and it really started in 2015, where I started seeing a very different law enforcement response. In the 90s, we understood these right-wing tactics, right? That they would pick an area where they knew they had political opposition to go hold a rally for the purpose.
For the purpose of inciting violence,
you know, they weren't trying to win hearts and minds.
No,
right?
No, they just want to beat people up.
The purpose of that was to attract opposition that they could then attack. Right. So they would come prepared for significant violence, while the counter protesters would come out, you know, ready to protest a group they disagree with. And so the violence that would be meted out would be far in favor of the white supremacists or far right militants. And law enforcement knew that in the 1990s and would prepare accordingly. And, you know, if you look at like the Greensboro massacre in the late 80s, same exact tactics, and law enforcement again knew about it but didn't intervene. So it changed in the 90s where law enforcement understood the tactics better, but I don't know how that knowledge was lost, 15 years later, where all of a sudden we started seeing this activity occurring, not just with law enforcement being unaware, but not taking any action afterwards, right? So many of these violent crimes are caught on tape. And yet...
Well, exactly. The evidence is clear.
Right. Yeah. There's no question about who instigated the violence. There's no question about who stabbed the person. There's no question about who pointed a firearm at the person, right? This was all right on tape. And, to the extent that the groups would say, well, we're attacking Antifa. Yeah. And law enforcement would also carried on with this concept of Antifa.
Right. It's so out of proportion.
Anyone they were attacking.
Right. And I'm Antifa, you're Antifa.
Right. And even if you push that aside and said, okay, well, we can't distinguish between which of these groups is instigating it, just count the attacks on journalists. And you've been in these violent episodes where they target journalists. So even if law enforcement just said, okay, we're just going to enforce the assaults on journalists, they would have had dozens of cases. And my concern is when law enforcement doesn't address the far-right violence at these events, it attracts a more violent person to that event.
I agree.
Because I'm violent regular. Just look at my in my regular life. Just look at my criminal history. Right. But now here's an opportunity for me to go commit violence and get away with it. Why wouldn't I join that group? And
and it does. It attracts more of it. It gets more radicalized as they feed off of each other too. I mean, some of these. You'll appreciate this. A couple of these Trump supporters that were here in Los Angeles that have been arrested for January 6th activity are also Peckerwoods.
Absolutely.
And we knew this was a Peckerwood, right? It was not shocking to me that he went to January 6th and beat a cop. Right. Of course he did. Of course he did.
Absolutely. And those people tend to have a very hostile relationship with law enforcement, right?
Right. Even though they're holding up these thin blue line flags. It's really okay. So Mike, let me ask you about that. It's weird. They have like this dual thing going on, right? They say we're on the cop side, we support our cops, we love our cops, thin blue line, flags, the whole 9 yards. But you're right. They hate cops too. So what is that about?
So it's just like the other tactics. It's a strategic ruse that I'm going to pretend I'm on the side of the police, and I'll come out to a Blue Lives Matter rally, and I'll wear the patch on my uniform. But whenever I talk to law enforcement audiences during this period of time, I would remind them these people kill police officers. Right. You don't have to look in 20 years ago in 1990s. Look recently, there is a long history of violence targeting law enforcement from far-right militant and white supremacist groups. And you have to understand they are not your friend. They just want to get cozy with you because it benefits them. And, the number of law enforcement officials who have been found on having submitted Oath Keeper membership forms or
huge
joining the Proud Boys and, having relationships with the Proud Boys is highly problematic. And I don't think law enforcement is really ready to wrestle with that problem.
Right.
It very often, sometimes you'll see these people get fired after some public outrage, but even in those cases, typically the people in that department knew that was an issue and allowed that person to stay. So
which is a problem,
and kind of like what you said, these agencies rely on public confidence that they are enforcing the law equally, and when there's clear evidence that they aren't, it makes it harder for the good police officers and the good FBI agents to do their jobs.
It makes it really hard. Another example would be one of the guys that was security for Richard Spencer at Charlottesville in 2017. One of his security guards, turns out he's a local law enforcement officer from Massachusetts.
Right.
I mean, this is a hardcore neo-Nazi, obviously. So he's in those Discord chats making some absolutely heinous remarks. And that brings me to the next point is like, okay, so how many arrests did this guy make based on those hate-filled biases?
And to her credit, the district attorney there has taken it upon herself to do an investigation of his previous cases, but we don't often see that. In fact, in Chicago, there is a police officer who was alleged to have a relationship with the Proud Boys, who was merely suspended, and the inspector general has pointed out that this person wasn't just associated, but had lied about that in interviews with the FBI and the police, and yet we haven't seen that kind of response, much less a more vigorous response to make sure that the bias that would be involved in that sort of behavior didn't infect his work.
Right. So the inspector general, which you've mentioned a few times, for folks that don't know what an inspector general does, they oversee law enforcement. They oversee the FBI. We have one here overseeing our local law enforcement, for example. How, in your opinion, how generally unbiased is an inspector general? Are they helpful? Do they try to do a good job of weeding out the bad guys that are messing things up? Or how does the system function as far as the inspector general is concerned?
So the performance varies by person. You know, typically this is an office that is led by one individual. So it really depends on their character and their interests.
Right.
You know, the Justice Department Inspector General that oversees the FBI, that office has typically been held by some of the best inspector generals there are. They're very diligent in documenting problems, but you have to understand that those offices have a limited role in oversight, right? That they can't be hyper aggressive in investigating these agencies because they often have audit responsibilities. And that requires cooperation from the agency to give them the data and access they need in order to do their regular work. So they operate in a way as just raising problems. And unfortunately, when they raise problems, even if you have an effective inspector general raising these problems, often you don't see Congress following through and actually, they look at it, they use it as an opportunity to wag their finger at the FBI witness that's sitting in front of them, but they haven't actually taken any initiative to either conduct deeper oversight because of the evidence that the inspector general uncovered, and they don't collectively join to say, okay, we need to see a change in this agency, and you are not going to receive funds, or there are Congress has a lot of tools. We're not going to approve your nominations for senior executive service officers. We're not going to cooperate with you in a number of ways as a collective, so that there can't be that individual retaliation by the FBI not doing something a particular congressman is asking for, because this is a collective effort, much like the church committee, that collectively decided that we need to understand how these organizations operate, because they do have such an impact on not just individual freedom, but our collective rights.
Right. Yeah.
One of the things I'm hopeful for, even though a lot of the right-wing outrage of the FBI is manufactured, that it's not based on reality, that it has undermined confidence on the side of the aisle that is usually knee-jerk defenders of the FBI and aggressive law enforcement. So I'm hopeful that if Congress is able to come to a more reasonable position, that a group of congressmen from both sides of the aisle can say, okay, we might not agree on what the problem at the FBI is, but we both agree there's a problem. Let's tear the lid off of this and take a hard look at how this organization operates.
So it's interesting for me because the left is asking for police reform in the sense that they want an unbiased police force that isn't racist, that conducts investigations based on an actual crime, not invasion of privacy, that is aware that there are local law enforcement officers that are biased and racist and need to be removed. So they want these types of reforms to be replaced. The right on the other side, like Marjorie Taylor Greene, I'm looking at you. She wants to replace the FBI with Pinochet's army. She wants a fascist army that does the bidding of whatever she thinks is the right thing to do, right? So they both fundamentally hate what's in place, but the way they see it being the right way is very, very different, right? So I'm not sure what comes of it, but I do hear what you're saying. I think there's a general erosion of public trust across the board, not just in law enforcement, but also with SCOTUS, with so much of our public institutions. And it's because of the fact that many of these problems that we're discussing just haven't been dealt with properly. And the lack of transparency, the optics of corruption, and it's not just optics in many cases, there actually is a lot of corruption. So there are very valid reasons that the American public feels this way. Now, part of what you work on now that I think is really fascinating too is laws that should protect whistleblowers, right? Currently, there are very few laws to protect whistleblowers, either from the FBI, from national security, NSA, no matter where you're coming from. And it is, it's a reality that our government does invade and infringe on constitutional rights in their efforts to, pursue what they think is a higher good. So what do we do about that?
So it has been a very frustrating aspect of my work, because you would think members of Congress would want to have agents coming to them highlighting problems that they see internally. And so working with Congress to improve whistleblower rights for federal employees has been slow going and difficult, particularly in this area that they call national security. And it's somewhat of a misnomer, because the vast majority of FBI work has nothing to do with national security. So even if you had a national security concern that suggested there needed to be some secrecy, that wouldn't apply to at least half of the FBI workforce. So there should be an avenue for them to report just like every other federal employee. But even with the national security stuff, there's whether you're talking about the leaks that Chelsea Manning was accused of engaging in, or Edward Snowden, they exposed an awful lot of abuse within the system. I mean, with Edward Snowden's leaks, Representative Sensenbrenner, who considered himself the father of the Patriot Act, said he didn't know that the FBI was interpreting his law this way. Well, you should have, right?
Exactly.
The committee held a number of hearings where you could have delved into that, even if in a closed session. So it shouldn't be that members of Congress find something out because of some leak. Right. But as Edward Snowden said, he saw what happened to whistleblowers like Tom Drake. He saw what happened to me. Right. He saw all this retaliation and didn't see a way to get that information to the public except through a leak. So, as much as these government officials decry leaks, there'd be far fewer leaks if they actually had a system that protected the whistleblower and actually worked, right? I mean, the way the FBI's whistleblower regulations work that I complied with, right? I didn't leak any information. I complied with the restrictions, and it went to Congress with an FBI minder with me to make sure I wasn't saying anything that was classified or inappropriate for me to tell a member of Congress. But that didn't stop the retaliation. And in fact, it made the retaliation more direct because they knew who I was day one. And the retaliation wasn't hidden. I was expecting a lot of subtle attacks. I mean, anybody working in a government position knows that there are 100 indignities a day that you suffer. You're denied for this training assignment. Your request for leave is denied. Your ability to get access to office products is cut off. Right? I mean, really small things. Just because it's a bureaucratic institution that. Right. Things happen. You can't really. So I expected the retaliation to be subtle. It wasn't. It was very direct, and it was very explicitly because you're a whistleblower. We're going to do this to you. right?
I mean, so your boss literally, I mean, what did he think was going to happen when he whited out your report? I mean, what he did should be criminal. It's just mind-blowing to me. You would think that they would want to correct these things.
So interestingly enough, it is criminal, right? It is criminal to manipulate an FBI report that way. And it was fascinating because I had already resigned by the time the Inspector General investigator discovered that. And he called me and he said, "You're not going to believe this, but they actually whited out a date on a document, to try to cover up their malfeasance." And he said, "Isn't that great? Why would they do that? It's so easy to discover."
Yeah,
and I said,
that's the other thing.
Is they know that there will be no repercussions. And he got angry with me and said, "I'm investigating this. I'm doing my, I'm the one who uncovered it." And I was like, "Okay, well, I wish you good luck. I hope you do something." Nobody was found. They couldn't find who was responsible for it.
For doing it. Yeah, that's the thing.
In the Inspector General investigation. So you would imagine that that the FBI would want to know who is altering documents in FBI files, right? That's a pretty big deal. That's a criminal act. No criminal investigation was open, and no effort to other than the Inspector General asking, did anybody get held responsible for that? There was no criminal investigation. The FBI is pretty good at criminal investigations. They know how to do that. And it just wasn't done. And I think it highlights the impunity that these managers have.
Yeah, no, they're power hungry. It sounds like they're power hungry. They want to protect their power. A lot of the times, I mean, it's the same way they do with like a lot of politicians, right? We see it with the LA City Council right now. How do we maintain our power? How do we protect the power we have and grow it? So when these folks are in those positions, these really important positions, and they're coming from that point of view, it's really destructive.
And there is a kind of cultish behavior as well, where, as soon as you step foot in the FBI Academy, they tell you, never embarrass the Bureau. And I sort of interpreted that as don't engage in misconduct that would make the Bureau look bad. But with some time there, I realized they said don't ever expose any misconduct by the FBI. And so, a lot of these managers, they're maybe, 2/3 of the way up the ladder. They're not the top yet, but they know that if they don't suppress this kind of abuse, number one, they could end up being blamed for it, right? Well, you were the manager at the time, so how did this happen under your watch? And number two, that exposure of the FBI would make their superiors look down on them at not being able to protect the FBI's reputation better. And again, these management problems are well documented, and yet you don't see any effort by Congress to actually do the work.
So many of these institutions are just stuck in the mud on so many levels. Mike, let me ask you this: Do you think the right-wing extremism that we're seeing currently right now in 2022, do you think it's worse than it was in the past? So
it's hard to say that. I tend to try to, in my training as an FBI agent, to be focused on evidence. And because we don't actually count
we don't.
It's hard to know. And there is sort of a shark bite in Florida effect where, when the media is covering it, it looks like there's a lot of it. And when the media is not covering it, it looks like there's none.
That's true.
They're persistently all the time. And it's fascinating because there's no official counting of domestic terrorism incidents involving white supremacists. Media and researchers tend to focus on previous media reports to identify whether it's high or low. Even though there's broad acknowledgement that the police often don't recognize this behavior and don't enforce it. So there are these kinds of lulls where, most researchers will say, well, white supremacists and far-right militants were, not really very active in the period after 9/11 till 2015, where, Yeah, they were.
Right? They were. Yeah,
they were. They were. You have to
were.
look for those cases and recognize that the police weren't investigating them and the media wasn't reporting them, but they were just as active.
Yeah, I agree.
So I don't know that the rate of violence has changed very much. I think what has changed is the amount of that violence that is public, right? That most of the violence they engage in is in the dark of night against communities that don't have a lot of political power.
That's right.
Where, since Donald Trump started running for office and making appeals to these people, the way sort of the authoritarian dynamic comes into play is that it encourages that violence and encourages people to act out, right? People will say, oh my gosh, the amount of public racism that not just elected representatives, but people in general are willing to express, shows an increase in that sort of ideology, where I always say, do you think somebody who wasn't racist 2 years ago just decided, well, I'm going to go ahead and be racist now? Or do you think somebody who was racist and maybe quiet about it now feels
just being loud? Yeah.
And it's the same thing with the violence, that because it's not being policed, they can commit that violence in public and even get a pat on the back from the police. I mean,
oh my God.
And I mean that literally. I mean, you see
literally a pat. I've seen it. I have seen it.
And there's an allegation that occurred in Penn State over the weekend that this isn't something that the police aren't seeing. They're seeing.
No, they saw it. They watched it happen. A Proud Boy walks over. He bear maced press members intentionally. He bear maced members of the public and walked out, and nothing happened.
Right. These guys, and walked to the police line to get protection from the crowd that he had just attacked. And that, and we saw that happen over the last 4 years, over and over again across the country. So this isn't just this is a much
across the country
social problem.
I agree. Another example would be down in San Diego. I was doing reporting on there was a Stop the Steal rally at Pacific Beach on the 9th. The DA down there's going hardcore after what she is calling the Antifa defendants with conspiracy to commit charges, the whole thing. But here's one of many examples. There was a guy who walked in front of the police skirmish line, a Trump supporter who turns out is also a Peckerwood, by the way. Turns out, through a FOIA request, I've also discovered he was under investigation, a current investigation not related to his actions on January 9th, but previously by the Joint Terrorism Task Force. Kid you not. But this guy walks in front of the police line, pulls the top off of a smoke grenade and threw it at the anti-fascist protesters. And the police just let it happen. They did nothing. And in this exchange, this FOIA exchange, you see them saying, the sergeant or one of the upper guys, I'm not sure, it might have been a lieutenant, basically saying, who are the officers that were present that day? I've got this thing from the Joint Terrorism Task Force. They need to talk to you. This guy had an open investigation. And I'm like, make it make sense.
Right. Right. And I always find it interesting when they say, well, we didn't know, when it's public. This is all public. It's happening in public. These people, if you look at who was charged for leading the seditious conspiracy, it's people who had been publicly violent in Portland and elsewhere across the country who became leaders of the group because they could promote their public violence as evidence of their leadership abilities. Right. So there's no, and again, oftentimes these individuals have histories of violence, criminal histories of violence.
100%. Unrelated necessarily to their political beliefs. Yeah, they have, exactly. Like, I'm sure whatever this guy was being looked at had nothing to do with his political beliefs.
And there's so much focus on the beliefs that, the FBI's knee-jerk response is, we'll do social media monitoring. We'll invest more in social media monitoring, which is where people are expressing themselves.
Telegram, whatever,
rather than investigating the crimes that are occurring on the street. And understanding how they're linked through an organized effort.
Right. Mike, the other thing I noticed too is then I go and I look at some of these police officers' social media profiles to see, what are they posting? And I can't tell you how many times they are posting QAnon stuff, ardent, giant Donald Trump supporters, that the election was stolen stuff. Like, I mean, and that's really just, it's alarming to see that, because you're like, okay, so this officer is obviously bringing his personal bias to his job in a way that's harmful. But also, like, wow, this guy believes a QAnon theory. Like, that's not good either. It's very frustrating. I don't know how you fix it.
Yeah, it is very frustrating. And, after the January 6th attack, when so many police officers were involved, there was, I've been involved in a couple of presentations with law enforcement where the leaders say, we don't know how to get into the minds of our
officers,
of the people, and we can't follow everybody's social media. And I tell them, you're making the problem bigger than it is. Here's what you need to do: go down to the squad room or the locker room where the officers are getting ready and say, I want to know who the racists are. I want to know who the people tell me.
Because you're right, they all know who the other ones are. They do know. You're right.
Of course they know. They know who the problems are. And and many times leadership knows as well. Right, that we see when the public outrage forces some kind of action. Often the police department knew. There were previous reportings about this. Moreover, go to the community, right? If they went to the community in San Diego and said, hey, who are the instigators?
Right.
They know. Right.
They know. But then you go to the DA's her personal beliefs, and she's posting George Soros memes too. So obviously, wow. Okay. Absolutely.
And that's part of it, right? That this isn't just a law enforcement problem.
No, it's not.
Problem in our prosecutors' offices. This is a problem in the judiciary. This infects every
even in SCOTUS.
Right. Every aspect of our society is infected by this problem. And, half of the reason why it's so persistent is because there is such a broad political effort to deny it and to say this isn't a problem.
Right. And, we didn't get here overnight. We've been sort of headed in this direction for a few years. We could have made a U-turn at any given point. And I also think part of the problem is that we have two parties that want to maintain power at all costs, and they are sort of go about protecting that power in various different ways. That's detriment to the American public, right? So they don't always have their constituents' well-being in mind. They just don't. I think income inequality is a prime example of that. You have both parties that are kind of catering to the donor classes. So there's just so many small things that contribute to the place that we're at.
Yeah. And I think that's a really good point, because, if you read academics who study fascism and how and who study authoritarianism, and, what they will point to is the neoliberal economic policies that are bipartisan, right?
Yep. They are totally bipartisan, yes.
And that has created the income inequality that you mentioned. And, there's no doubt that people are suffering today. Even people who are lucky enough to have a good job could be bankrupted by a medical illness, by a serious illness, could be bankrupted by, some small life event. And so everybody is feeling this insecurity, and they reach out for somebody to blame. And it's easy for far-right polemicists to say, oh, here's who to blame, this group that's even less privileged than you are.
And you are.
Sort of a hard
it's
way
very
to do it.
effective.
It's an easy group to describe, right? We can describe this group. You can look at them and identify them. They're the problem. And you're the victim of their abuse. And, it's not as if that income inequality was corrected under Trump campaign.
Nope.
Right?
Listen, from
benefiting them. So what I am frustrated by is that there isn't a broader effort by somebody who could break into the mainstream to they have to convince the American public of a lie. That this is George Soros who is doing this to you, which of course is just a dog whistle for Jews.
100%.
Immigrants that are doing this to you. They have to convince somebody of something that's not true, that there's no evidence to support, rather than explaining to them directly what is causing the problem and how you can solve it. That we can't sell, I want to give your family free health care.
Right.
It is a failure of will, not a failure of messaging.
It is a failure of will. I agree with you. I mean, there's very little difference between like Ronald Reagan. Oh, okay, right on. We're at an hour anyway. There's very little difference between Reagan, Bill Clinton, Obama. Like, go down the line. No matter which party is in power, they have both. Reagan going forward bought into this neoliberal principle that free market system, privatization. The market's the moral arbiter of all goods. Like, it's been very detrimental for the working classes in this country. You can see how there's been a steady increase in the income inequality, and I do think it is committing to the anger and the rise in fascism in the country. So on that note.
Yeah, just one quick thing.
Yes.
That bipartisan agreement is also infects the way the intelligence agencies and law enforcement are led. Every FBI director has been a Republican, appointed by Democrats and Republicans.
Right.
There is one mindset that gets you to a leadership position in this organization, so you can understand why that organization tends to be even more conservative and right-wing than the society it's supposed to be protecting.
That is really wild. You're right. So even if the Democrats are in charge, they're going to point a Republican to that position because that's the sort of accepted viewpoint.
Right.
Mike, your book, loved it. Where can people buy your book if they if they watch this and want to pick it up? And I highly recommend it. It's a really excellent read. If you want to get into the depths of not only your experiences undercover, but going through that whole whistleblower process, and also your ideas about reforming some of these things and fixing them.
So it's available on any of the big booksellers, or you can get it directly from the New Press, which is the publisher.
Yeah, I think that's where I bought it, on their website.
Yeah, Disrupt, Discredit, Divide, How the New FBI Damages Democracy.
Right on, right on. All right, Mike, thank you so much for coming on Right Wing Insanity. A really solid conversation. It'll be very informative, I think, for our viewers, and I'd love to have you on again.
Great, anytime. And thanks for your work.